The night is clear, and the air is thin with cold. Far above, the sky is a quiet ocean. Stars hang like slow lanterns, and the Milky Way looks like a soft river poured across the dark. You tilt your head and imagine a drifting shadow just beyond what eyes can hold, a hush at the edge of sight, patient and unhurried. It isn't a light or a flare. It is a feeling like a shape moving through starlight without asking to be seen. Astronomers talk about it in calm voices, a mystery that returns each winter like breath on glass. Planet 9, the unseen shepherd of distant orbits. No one has taken its picture. No one has watched it crawl across a camera frame. Yet something tugs at the outer playground of our solar system, and the toys move in ways that hint at a careful hand. Out there, beyond Neptune's icy border, comets and minor planets trace long, cold ellipses. Their paths cluster like reeds leaning in the same wind. They tilt and point, as if obeying a hidden mass. At midnight observatories, telescopes sweep that deep. Wide-field cameras drink photons so faint they feel like whispers pressed into the glass. Spectrographs slice those whispers into colors, looking for any signature that doesn't fit the old songs of rock and ice. Computers run gently, modeling gravity's grammar. If an object of a certain weight hides in a certain place, these distant travelers should twist this way and not that. The math hums. The patterns repeat. The cosmic whisper grows more confident. If you are listening as you drift towards sleep, that is why these stories exist. Subscribe and share where you are and what time it is. I read them: New York at midnight, London before dawn, Sydney at noon like stars across the earth. A quiet map of listeners keeping watch under one sky. Now, in the mind's telescope, that drifting shadow sharpens. Imagine an ancient traveler moving near its far-off perihelion, where the sun is a pale coin and heat is a memory. The object is dark, wrapped in a gentle veil of dust and frozen gas. Its face drinks light and gives almost none back. If it is a planet, it is a quiet one. If it is a messenger, it is well disguised. Astronomers remember how such secrets are found. Neptune was once only a tug written in numbers. A wobble here, a delay there, a planet predicted by pen and proven by lens. Pluto rose in a similar hush found by patient blinking of plates, a tiny fleck shifting between two nights of starlight. We learn, again and again, that the unseen leaves fingerprints, a trajectory bent. A comet's return slightly early, a cluster of orbits pointing like compass needles toward a place we have not yet looked. The idea grows with every sweep of the sky. Infrared surveys comb the darkness for heat that should leak from a giant body. Algorithms scan for motion, tiny pixels stepping across a field while stars hold still. In the data, there are hints: cold objects, faint arcs, a handful of suspects that could be small and near or large and far. Each suspect gets a careful check. Is it a blemish on the sensor? A faint galaxy pretending to move? A bit of cosmic dust caught the wrong way? Most vanish. A few remain. The whisper doesn't shout. It simply refuses to fade. We speak of orbits because orbits tell truth in slow time. Picture the solar system as a vast stage, with gravity as the music. The inner planets dance in quick circles, feet warm by the fire. Farther out, the dancers move in glides so long that a lifetime is a single step. If a heavy guest stands in the wings, the music changes, even if we cannot see the guest. The outer dancers lean toward that unseen figure. Their ellipses stretch, their poles point, and their nodes, those quiet hinges where an orbit crosses the sun's broad plane line up like patient stones. Sometimes the mind wanders. What if the guest is not a planet at all? What if the traveler is something made? A vessel wearing the dust of a minor world, a spectrograph tucked inside, a slow engine hidden under a skin of rock and ice. A hostile harbinger would not glow with wild heat. It would be cold, feeding on sunlight only when the path carries it close to the star. The rest of the time it would drift under a black body, curved so quiet that even our best instruments would confuse it with debris. Its trajectory would be chosen like a sentence written across centuries. No rush, no obvious turn, only a gentle correction when the stage is clear. But bedtime is for calm, not fear, and the scientist's voice stays level. First, we test the simple stories. Nature loves simple tricks that feel like magic from far away. Perhaps passing stars once brushed the outskirts and left the Kuiper Belt in a gentle tilt. Perhaps our surveys are biased, our telescopes looking in the same directions over and over, drawing patterns from our own habits. Perhaps there is a population of icy bodies we have not catalogued, and their collective gravity fools the numbers. These are honest answers, and they must be weighed. The telescope becomes a listening glass. It holds the night like a cupped hand. Photons that left their sources hours, years, and ages ago settle on the sensor in silent applause. One by one, frames stack into deeper images. The computer tracks a faint point. Does it shift in a way that marks our own planet's motion? Or does it walk with purpose across the canvas of fixed stars? A real traveler moves differently than noise. A real traveler keeps time with celestial mechanics, with parallax and patience. The spectrograph, that keeper of colors, offers another path. Even the coldest objects have a fingerprint in light. Reflected sunshine carries hints of surface, ice, or dust. A probe in disguise might mimic those hints, wearing a coat of native grain scratched from a captured comet. But matching nature is hard in the small details, how light bounces at certain angles, how faint absorption lines line up. It is here that curiosity listens. It is here that the gentle veil might flutter. We are not alone in the watch. Professional arrays turn under high, clear air. Backyard telescopes whisper in driveways beside sleeping dogs. A student checks a faint object at 3 a.m., blinking exposures and marking a tiny shift with a pencil. Data travels, and software compares yesterday's guess with tonight's truth. Each observer is a lantern. Together, they brighten the map of the cold. You can feel the solar system as a living structure. The solar wind drifts outward like a constant breath. Comets sip it and trail thin veils that glow only if you look long enough. The heliosphere, bubble shaped by our star's wind, stretches like a soft shield into the darkness. A traveler near the edge would hear that breath in instruments tuned to the quiet. If it listened for us, it might count our radio murmurs, the fuzz of old transmissions stretching out past Pluto, a very faint echo of cities and songs. Even so, the heart of the mystery remains in orbit. Gravity writes neatly, and we can read. Models explore thousands of scenes. Add a mass here, tilt a plane there, let a century pass. The families of comets respond like reeds in a pond. Place a heavy guest in the right corner of the map, and those reeds lean together. Place a guest of metal and stone disguised in dust, and the reeds still lean, because gravity does not care about costume. Whether planet or probe, the tug is the same. If there is intent inside that shadow, it hides well. It would not flare. It would not beam. It would choose patience, and patience is a perfect cloak in a universe that moves slow at the edge. The hostile version feels like a fortress that doesn't walk, only waits. The neutral version feels like a surveyor that takes notes in the cold. Each story sits quietly on the shelf while the data accumulates. So we return to the instruments and the quiet math. The telescope parks at a new field. The spectrograph calibrates with gentle clicks, a librarian putting books in order. Radar teams consider long-shot spings that may never return, or may return as a soft echo you could miss if you blink. Machine learning combs the archives for motion no one noticed, a pixel that took a step in 10 hours and was forgotten. The tone stays soft, like a lullaby for careful thinking. The sky needs time. The models need more points. The observers need clear nights and warm sleeps. In the slow work, our remains. We are small, but our listening is wide. When you close your eyes, the darkness is not empty. It is a cradle of silence holding a million unnamed things. Near morning, the imagination returns to that drifting shadow. You picture it skimming a faint perihelion, using the sun like a hearth for a brief while, then turning away to cool in the deep. You picture dust on its skin and frost in its seams, starlight sliding off with nothing to hold. Maybe a small antenna sleeps under that frost. Maybe only rock sleeps there, ancient and nothing more. Either way, the orbits will tell. Motion remembers what the eye forgets. And so the watch goes on soft, patient, and without alarm. The telescopes inhale starlight. The spectrographs sort whispers. The models sing their quiet songs of gravity. Somewhere beyond the bright lanes of our known planets, a hidden harbinger may glide under a gentle veil, or nothing at all may wait but cold. The night doesn't answer. It invites. The glow fades toward dawn, and in its fading there is a question that will not let go. The silence deepens, yet hidden in that silence is something waiting to be understood. The sky opens like a quiet door, and the solar system breathes out toward its cold edge. Past Neptune's slow blue arc and Pluto's thin light, there's a broad, dim country made of ice and memory. The Kuiper Belt lives there, millions of small worlds, each one turning on a path so long that a single orbit is older than a tree, older than a city, older than the stories we tell in our sleep. In this outer dusk, starlight arrives thin as frost, and motion is the language that never raises its voice. Astronomers map this country one speck at a time. Through wide-field telescopes, the camera frames look like snowy static until patient eyes begin to notice rhythm. A dot moves a fraction. Another dot, a night later, moves the same fraction in the same direction. Computers help the noticing. Frames stack and blink. The software draws a faint line where the eye saw only noise. This is how a path is found. One whisper layered on another until a sentence appears. The whispers hint at order. Some of these distant bodies, the scattered, the tilted, the long elliptical wanderers, do not point every which way. They prefer certain angles. They gather into clusters like brushstrokes crossing the same patch of sky. Their perihelia lean together as if a quiet shepherd stands just out of sight. This is the clue that will not soften. A forbidden alignment, the kind that simple chance would wash away, keeps raising its hand. No single object gives the secret. The strength is in the chorus. One icy world slopes its orbit a little high. Another turns its node like a hinge toward the same quadrant. A third traces an ellipse that seems to salute a particular stretch of emptiness, a place no telescope has yet caught moving light. Each alone could be a fluke. Together they look like a pattern pressed by a gentle, unseen palm. Scientists test this with models. Gravity is the paint. The solar system is the canvas. The computer is the calm wrist that repeats the stroke again and again. Start with the known planets, their masses, their inclinations, the sun's steady pull. Add a swarm of small Kuiper objects. Let time run, slow at first, then fast. Watch how their orbits evolve, how some scatter inward, how others freeze into resonances, how a few escape into darkness. The clusters appear only faintly. Then the modelers add a hidden presence, a heavy traveler on a long, cold trajectory. When that mass is placed in the right place, the clusters sharpen. The brushstroke thickens. The forbidden alignment turns from rumor into preferred path. The observatories keep listening. Atop dry mountains, the air is thin and the stars seem closer. The telescope domes open like sleepy eyes. Sensors chill to catch the softest photons. The sky drifts, and tracking motors hum like distant bees. In the control room, screens glow pale blue and gray, the colors of careful attention. A spectrograph waits on the side bench in case a faint object grows bright enough to split into colors. Most nights, the data is quiet. Quiet is not empty. Quiet is a yardstick against which a change can be measured. Sometimes an object refuses to fit. Its trajectory is too clustered, its tilt too loyal to the strange pattern. Analysts pull the archives and summon old exposures. They find the dot again 6 months back, a year back, 3 years back. They correct for the Earth's own moving perch, parallax turning our planet into an unsteady viewing platform. After the correction, the path still bows in the same direction, as if some distant fortress of mass has curled space-time there into a subtle valley. People like to imagine grand reasons. That is human and tender. But the voice here stays gentle, slow, and clear. First, we must learn what the numbers say without story. The Kuiper Belt is not a tidy ring. It is a broad, lumpy skirt of debris left from the solar system's early days. Past gravitational scuffles, Jupiter's loud influence, Neptune's careful migration shaped it like weather-shaped stones. Survey bias also matters. Telescopes look where nights are long and seeing is stable, favoring certain sky patches. A pattern born from human habit can masquerade as cosmic intent. So the teams run counter-tests. They randomize observation windows. They simulate fake skies with no hidden planet, only known physics and realistic survey footprints. They ask, do the same clusters rise from bias alone? Often the answer is no, or not quite. The bias explains some tilt, some clumping, but not the full brushstroke. The unexplained remainder remains thin as smoke, stubborn as a riddle. In the data rooms, printouts of spectrograph plots pinned to cork boards. Most show only what is expected. Reflected sunlight from frozen surfaces, small dips where ice absorbs, colors that say ordinary in the language of light. But the habit of looking builds a kind of listening. It teaches patience. It says, do not rush the anomaly. Let the anomaly come to you. If a hidden presence sculpts the orbits but hides its own face, we will still meet its shadow in the choreography of others. Imagine the belt itself as a slow ballet. Each icy body is a dancer with a card that says where to enter and how to bow. The stage is vast. The music is almost silent. The unseen guest does not step to the front. Instead, it stands in the wings. The dancers near the edge lean toward that darkness as they pass, and the lean becomes part of the routine. To a hurried eye, nothing happens. To a patient eye, the routine is unmistakable. On certain nights, the moon rises late, and the Milky Way pulls a soft veil across the domes. The astronomers step outside and breathe cold air. They talk about the earliest hints, how a handful of minor planets first seemed to agree on their pointing, how new discoveries join the line, how skeptics pressed for better math, better catalogs, better error bars. They talk about chaos too, the way small differences in starting position, multiplied across millions of orbits, turn neat predictions into fog. And yet within the fog, structure persists. The whisper does not become a shout, but it does not fade either. It holds. There is humility in this work. No telescope can swallow the whole sky at once. No survey can drink every photon. Even the best instruments miss faint travelers who slip between exposures or hide against crowded star fields. That is why machine learning is invited, not as a miracle, but as a careful assistant. Algorithms scan for sequences humans might overlook, 3 dots in a slanted line across weeks, an object that brightens only when the air is driest, a trajectory that looks wrong until parallax is removed. The computer does not know awe, but it helps us earn it. Out beyond the belt, space grows even emptier. Heliospheric wind thins to a whisper. Cosmic rays cut clean tracks through detectors. The sun is a pale coin behind you. If a heavy guest rests there, it is very far, very cold, and very slow. Its presence is a shape in the field, not a blaze. You would know it the way you know the depth of a lake by how the shore curves, not by seeing the water's middle. You would know it the way a sailor knows wind by the angle of sails, not by catching air in bare hands. The thought of design floats at the edges of the conversation, never as a claim, only as a question. Could something intentional hide within the numbers, wearing nature like a coat? A disguised messenger would not announce itself with radio. It would write its initials in geometry, if at all, and geometry is hard to fake for long. An orbit is not only a path. It is a promise to return. If intent lives inside any traveler, its promise would leave traces our models could learn to expect. Until then, the work is soft and steady. New surveys come online. The cameras grow wider and deeper. A small observatory joins a network and begins contributing follow-up nights, filling the gaps when weather elsewhere turns unkind. A student, months from finishing, discovers that a cluster of orbits shares an unexpected resonance, like distant bells briefly agreeing. A senior scientist rechecks an old bias correction and trims it tighter, and yet the pattern holds. The team writes, revises, breathes, waits. Between frames, the eye returns to the sky itself. The Kuiper Belt is not loud, and that is part of its beauty. Comets slumber there. Their tails only dreams until sunlight wakes them. Minor planets roll in slow arcs, throwing no shadows we can see from here. The region is gray with a hint of blue, like dawn frozen mid-rise. Somewhere inside that muted palette, the brushstroke continues, a rumor given shape by 100 careful hands. If the hidden presence is real, its patience teaches ours. If the pattern is an echo of older storms, migrations, scatterings, small kicks from passing stars, then the echo still carries meaning. An echo tells you the shape of the room. These clustered trajectories tell us the shape of the outer room of our sun, where gravity writes with a thinner pen and yet still writes. The night deepens. In the control room, one more exposure loads. The field looks ordinary at first glance, pinpoints on velvet, a galaxy like a faint thumbprint. Then the software marks a moving speck, the newest note in a long, low song. It is small, but its path leans where so many others have leaned. Someone smiles without speaking. The sky has offered another whisper. And so the map grows, not in leaps, but in layers. The clustered orbits remain like careful threads stitching across the dark. A hidden presence may wait just beyond the border of certainty, or the border may itself be the lesson, that even in quiet, structure lives. The monitors dim, the domes close, and the stars keep their slow positions. The glow fades toward the horizon, but in its fading, it carries a question that lingers in every watcher's mind. In the drifting quiet, one can almost sense that another secret is about to reveal itself. The night holds its breath, and the past leans close. In the quiet, old discoveries speak again, soft voices carried by starlight and patience. Long before cameras grew clever, people watched the sky with naked eyes and careful notes. They named the visitors that burned and faded: comet, meteor, wandering star, and they guessed at the rules behind those journeys. Snowy tails meant ice. Sudden streaks meant stone. But sometimes the sky changed without a visible cause, and that was the deeper wonder. The unseen could move the seen, and numbers could point to things no one had yet found. We begin with Neptune, a world first written in the language of gravity. In the 1840s, astronomers noticed that Uranus did not behave. Its orbit ran slightly off the track predicted by Newton's law. The difference was small, like a pebble hidden in a shoe, but it rubbed at the mind. Two mathematicians, working far apart, tried the same thought. Perhaps another planet's pole was bending Uranus's path. They used pencil and patience, turning irregular motion into a map for a thing that had no name. When a telescope finally aimed at the predicted patch of sky, Neptune was there, blue, far, serene. A planet found first by math. A ghost made solid by a lens. This is one of the oldest proofs that gravity leaves fingerprints you can read. Later came Pluto, a colder, smaller echo of that method. For years, people searched for a planet X, a heavy thing that might explain more minor quirks. Clyde Tombaugh, a young observer with tireless eyes, blinked photographic plates by hand, 2 images of the same star field taken days apart, flipping them back and forth to spot any tiny shift. On a winter night in 1930, a fleck moved. It was real, though not as massive as many had hoped. Pluto entered the story with myth in its pockets, and over time, the myth softened. We learned it was part of a larger family, the Kuiper Belt, more cousin than king. Yet Pluto's discovery remains a lantern on this path. Careful observation can lift a pebble from a river of starlight and call it by name. The lesson from these tales is simple and deep. Orbits, remember. If a hidden mass is present, it writes its presence into other bodies' motion. Even when the culprit refuses to shine, its tug is a signature. This is the heart of perturbation theory, the calm craft of reading small deviations like a poet reads meter. A comet arrives early by hours. An asteroid's track leans by a fraction. A cluster of distant worlds shares a strange tilt. Each detail is a soft drumbeat. The rhythm repeats. The mind starts to hear a pattern and asks if the pattern is a chance, a habit, or a message. Resonance adds another note. In space, resonance is a quiet handshake between orbits. For every 2 times one object goes around the sun, another goes around 3 or 5, or some neat ratio that locks their dance. Jupiter's moons show it clearly, keeping time like careful metronomes. Asteroids near Jupiter gather in stable lanes called the Trojan swarms, held by the giant's gravity and a simple balance of push and pull. Farther out, near Neptune, many minor planets fall into 2 to 3 resonance, a rhythm that helps keep them safe from close passes. Resonances are the scaffolding of the solar system, the hidden rails that guide slow trains across black country. In the outskirts, the scaffolding grows faint but not absent. When astronomers trace the distant orbits that take hundreds or thousands of years to complete, they see families forming groupings in angle and tilt and perihelion distance. These are not neat marching bands. They are more like clusters of reeds leaning in a shared breeze. The reeds move together because something nudges the air. That nudge might be a past migration of Neptune and the other giants. It might be the long memory of a passing star. Or it might be the steady pull of a body we have not yet seen, a heavy traveler carving a slow groove in space-time. The tools for reading these grooves have grown gentle and strong. Telescopes gather light as thin as breath and feed it to spectrographs, which break it into colors as a prism breaks dawn on a frosted window. From those colors, we learn surface hints. Methane ice here, water frost there, a dusting of complex organics in between. The physics is not loud. It speaks in tiny dips and slopes in the spectrum, like fingerprints in powder. We match those lines to lab measurements and build a picture of worlds we will never touch. A minor planet that looks gray to the eye becomes a place with history-irradiated crust. Fresh impacts, stirrings of frozen chemistry that move on the timescale of ages. Orbital mechanics, for all its poetry, is also a craft you can hold. Imagine the solar system as a giant mobile hanging from a nursery ceiling. Each planet is a weight on a wire, balanced so the whole piece drifts but does not fall apart. Now imagine adding a small new weight far out on a long arm. The balance shifts. The inner pieces wobble a little. The outer ones turn their faces a degree or 2. If you watch long enough, the pattern of that new weight's pull becomes legible. This is how a hidden presence speaks, not with light, but with the choreography of others. The past also holds cautionary tales. Once, people thought there was a world inside Mercury's orbit. They called it Vulcan and hunted it for years because Mercury's path seemed wrong by a hair. The planet was never found. The truth turned out to be stranger and better. Einstein's new view of gravity explained Mercury's motion without an extra planet at all. Space-time itself was the dancer. This memory keeps astronomers humble. Not every mystery is a hidden thing. Sometimes it is a better idea waiting to be named. Even so, the human part of this work is tender. Consider the old observatories, wood warm underhand, metal gears worn smooth by decades of careful turning. Consider the frosted horizon over a desert dome, the way dawn paints the floor with a slow, soft stripe. People have stood in those rooms and listened for echoes all their lives. They sip coffee from chipped mugs and speak in simple words about difficult math. They write uncertainties in pencil first because it feels honest. All lives in the calm between their sentences. Think of the sky's timeline. The solar system formed in a cloud of dust and gas, a disk bright where it was warm, dark where it was cold. In the center, the sun lit. In the middle, planets gathered and cleared their lanes. On the edges, stragglers remained comets, minor planets, scraps that never found a big home. The giants may have migrated, trading places like slow dancers. Their gravity scattered smaller bodies outward, built resonances, and left scars that still show. The Kuiper Belt and beyond are those old scars, beautiful, pale, and precise enough to store a memory. When we say memory, we do not mean that ice thinks. We mean that patterns last. A resonant orbit is a valley in the landscape of motion, and objects roll there and stay. A perturbation is a finger run once through sand, and sometimes the groove holds even when the hand is gone. We walk those grooves with equations and computers, playing the history forward and backward, testing which choices could have led to what we see. Even if a hidden world never arrives in a photograph, its echo might already be in our notebooks, repeated in the clean angles of a dozen faint paths. Now and then, the story turns speculative, because the future is a part of the past's echo. People ask, what if a visitor learned our rules and used them? Could something designed, dressed as rock and ice, hide by surfing the very resonances we trust? If such a traveler wanted to be a rumor rather than a revelation, it would choose patience, not display. It would leave nothing but the neatness of its orbit and the silence of its skin. The thought is both unsettling and beautiful. Not a prophecy, only a question hung like a lantern in the mind's tree. The more we look, the more the line between fear and wonder softens. Fear asks for alarms. Wonder asks for understanding. The watchers of the sky carry both, but they wear wonder on the outside. They speak of fit and confidence and outliers, but under the words is a simple feeling. To learn is to be less alone. A faint body at the dark edge of the sun's reach is not a threat in this telling. It is an invitation to read the room we live in with better eyes. So the nights go on. Plates become pixels. Pencils become code. The same patience remains. An astronomer taps a keyboard and calls up a simulation from last year. A student runs a fresh batch with tighter uncertainties and watches the virtual sky evolve. The plots ripple with lines perihelion directions, inclination clouds, clusters like small constellations on a graph. In those quiet figures the drumbeat continues. A pattern, a possibility, a pull that could be chance or could be message. Outside, the cold air smells like stone and thin pine. The dome turns slowly, metal purring. A faint band of zodiacal light sunlight on dust leans up from the horizon, so gentle you could miss it if you blinked. In that soft glow, it is easy to remember that all of this began with simple looking. with heads tilted back and questions asked aloud into the dark. What will the answer be? Perhaps just gravity, wearing no mask at all. Perhaps a heavy planet, old and quiet, rounding the sun on a path so wide it feels like exile. Perhaps something stranger that still obeys the same patient math. Whatever waits, the path to it is made of echoes, Neptune's tidy proof, Pluto's delicate blink, resonances that hum like faraway bells, perturbations that sketch a hand where the hand is not seen. The glow on the horizon thins. The screens dim. The night folds its wings. And in that folding, the question does not end. It rests like a soft drumbeat under the heart, steady, restrained, and full of a wonder that will not go out. Night settles over the mountain like a soft blanket, and the dome opens with a whisper. The telescope tilts, slow and steady, and the mirror inside wakes to starlight. It is not a window tonight. It is a listening glass. Every photon is a syllable, every speck of light a word spoken across years. The room is dim, the screens glow, and outside the air is thin and kind to fragile signals. Astronomers move gently here. Their voices are low, their steps careful, as if the floor were part of the instrument. On the monitors, the sky arrives as pale gray fields sprinkled with dots. This is not how the eye remembers the stars. This is how the sensor hears them quiet, even without the sparkle. A long exposure begins. The control clock counts. The telescope tracks Earth's turning with motors that purr like distant bees. For 20 minutes, the mirror holds still. For 20 minutes, the universe pours a steady stream of whispers onto the camera face. When the frame closes, software wakes. The image is dark velvet. The dots are mapped. The machine compares them to last night's dots and to a sky catalog older than the students in the room. Most points match. A few do not. The differences are measured in pixels, then in arcseconds, then in motions that have names: proper motion for nearby stars, parallax for the Earth's yearly circle, drift for satellites that cross like insects in the light. What is left after all the ordinary motions are subtracted is what the team calls the residue. In the residue, anomalies live. Another program loads, an attention specialist for the faint. It stacks several frames taken minutes apart. Stars blur into small, tidy smudges. Anything that moved during the exposure becomes a streak, a hairline drawn by time. The algorithm flags streaks that point the wrong way, streaks that break at the edge of a detector, streaks that look like cosmic rays punching through the sensor. Those are thrown away. What remains is a set of candidates that move just a little, just right, as if they were far and slow and cold. In a side rack, the spectrograph hums. It is the quiet librarian of the night. When a faint target grows bright enough, a slit opens to collect its light. Inside, gratings split that light into colors. The spectrum appears on screen as a thin rainbow turns sideways, with dips and rises like the coastline of a calm sea. From those tiny shapes come guesses. Water ice reflects this way, methane absorbs here, darker dust softens the blue. For an ordinary minor planet, the signature is familiar. For a strange one, the pattern might be slightly wrong, an edge too sharp, a trough too shallow, a brightness that refuses to change with phase the way rocks usually do. But tonight the quarry is quieter than spectroscopy can easily catch. Tonight is mostly about motion, the language that cold things speak when they cannot spare light. A cold object hides in two ways. First, it is dark by nature, wrapped in frozen skins that swallow sunlight. Second, it can choose geometry as a cloak. Keep perihelion, the nearest point to the sun, so far that even there the warmth is thin. At that distance, brightness drops as the square of distance out and the square back again. A double fade. Dimmer because it is far. Dimmer again because the sun's gift is weak. If the traveler also wears dust, a powder of grains that scatter light in tricky angles, it becomes the sky's own shadow. The team knows this, so they listen longer, not louder. The survey plan is a slow cadence. Visit a field, drift to another, return after a few hours, then again the next night, then a week later. A real object's motion has a specific rhythm made from three things: the object's own path, Earth's parallax wobble, and the solar system's shared dance around the sun. The code fits all three at once, testing orbits like shoes. Most fits are bad and tossed away. A few fit gently. Those few earn a name in a folder and a request to the world. Please look here, if your weather allows, and listen with us. Infrared maps join the watch, because heat tells stories that light cannot. Out in the cold, even a dark rock leaks a little warmth. Space telescopes designed for the infrared see that warmth as a soft glow, the way a hand sees breath on glass. But the trick is hard. The glow is faint and confused by background galaxies that crowd the sky at those wavelengths. Algorithms help again. They subtract known galaxies. They flag repeating specks that shift just enough between surveys months apart. Sometimes the flags lead to nothing. Sometimes they circle back to a dot that optical telescopes also noticed, a cross-confirmation that feels like a heartbeat. In the control room, someone opens a notebook. On paper, the math looks kinder. Here is the idea of trajectory fit. We have positions at different times. We wish to find a path that explains them. The pencil draws a set of small crosses, measurements with tiny error bars like whiskers. A curve runs through them, a guess of an orbit. Change the assumed distance, and the curve tilts. Change the inclination, and the curve's shadow on the sky shifts. The best fit is the one that asks for the smallest stretch in the data and the simplest story in the physics. The person with the pencil does not push. They let the fit settle, the way a bowl finds its place on a table when you nudge it and let go. Perihelion, that shy corner of every ellipse, can be a hiding place. When an orbit brings a body closest to the sun, its speed grows, but its brightness may not help us if the angle turns unkind. If perihelion happens on the far side of the sun from Earth, glare drowns the faint. If it happens low along the ecliptic, the object can vanish against crowded star fields or slip through seasonal gaps when observatories rest. A patient traveler could time its nearest pass for those blind moments, not by smart intent perhaps, but by orbit alone. The sky has blind spots. The map has seams. People sometimes whisper about disguise. Could a probe wear stone the way a wolf wears snow? The engineering is not impossible to picture. Instruments buried under rock and ice for shielding. Passive cooling to bleed heat into deep space. Low-power electronics in long sleep. A small sensor waking at perihelion to taste the solar wind. Dust would be natural clothing. Grains electrostatically clinging. Micrometeor strikes adding more. The surface signature in a spectrograph would look like an old minor planet, not like metal. Radar would barely notice at that range. The only loud mark would be the path itself, written in gravity's hand. And so the searches lean on paths. The wide surveys, those great nets that sweep the sky, cast again tonight. They do not watch one field forever. They breathe. The cadence is a heartbeat. Expose, read, slew, settle, expose. Between heartbeats, the data pipeline runs. It filters satellite trails, masks sensor ghosts, corrects for flat field quirks and bias frames. It stamps each candidate with time and sky location. It cross-checks against catalogs of known moving objects. The survivors of this long, quiet test are few. Each survivor earns a human glance, because sometimes a person sees what a machine does not, a star blend mistaken for motion, a galaxy core that pulsed in seeing, a speck that seems to step with intent. Midnight drifts to morning. The air over the ridge carries the scent of frost and dust. Inside, the run planner slides fields for the next hours into a soft sequence, like cards in a careful hand. A gap opens in the schedule. Someone suggests a hop 2 quick frames on a possible mover found earlier in the week. The dome slews. The stars trail for a moment, and then still. The exposure starts. In the quiet, the team counts in their heads, not for luck, but to keep company with the time. When the image displays, the screen looks ordinary until subtraction reveals its newness. Last week's frame subtracts from tonight's. Most of the field vanishes, star for star, pixel for pixel, leaving a low snow of noise. In this clean difference, a small dot remains. It sits where the predicted fit said it should sit, within the size of a pinhead. A second image confirms the step. The motion is slow, the angle consistent with an object far beyond Neptune. It is not proof of anything yet. It is a thread to hold. Back in the rack, the spectrograph gets a brief try. The target is too dim for a full reading, but a whisper of slope appears, slightly red, perhaps dusted, perhaps old. It is nothing people would call strange. But the ordinary can be a mask, and the mask can still be true. The record is saved. The team marks a follow-up for a larger telescope, one with a mirror that gathers more syllables per second from the same faint voice. The night grows thin. A student writes notes for the morning email. Coordinates, times, predicted motion for the next week. A polite request to colleagues under other skies. The language is simple and steady. Please observe. Please confirm. The network of watchers is wide now. Desert ridges, high islands, southern pampas, backyard mounts in small towns where dogs sleep through the hum of tracking motors. Each listener adds a dot. Dots grow into arcs. Arcs become orbits. Orbits become stories that either close or open doors. As the dome shutters slide shut, the telescope becomes a dark shape against a pale band of dawn. The mirror cools. The screens dim. In the silence that follows, the work does not feel finished or unfinished. It feels ongoing, like a tide. The listening glass will open again tomorrow and the next night, and the algorithms will comb the noise for threads that hold. Perhaps a faint anomaly will rise from the residue, a motion too tidy, a tilt too loyal, a brightness that refuses the usual curve. Perhaps the whisper will stay a whisper, teaching patience more than revelation. Either way, the method remains a comfort. Patient scans. Quiet nights. The hope that the next pixel is the reply. The sky gives what it gives, and then it waits to see if we can hear. The last light on the console clicks off. Outside, the horizon takes a soft breath. The darkness lingers for a beat before it loosens, and in that lingering, something unspoken seems to listen back. The silence deepened, yet hidden in that silence was something waiting to be understood. The night is a chalkboard, and motion writes in thin, patient lines. Far beyond the bright cities of the inner planets, the outer country of ice and dust moves to a quieter beat. Here, orbits are slow sentences. An ellipse is a thought. A tilt is a whisper of history. A node, the place where an orbit crosses the sun's wide plane, is a hinge that remembers which way the door once swung. If you stand at the edge of imagination and look outward, you can almost see those lines glowing. Pale arcs against black, a soft geometry that never hurries and never forgets. Astronomers learn to read this handwriting the way sailors read swells. They speak of semi-major axes and eccentricities in calm tones, holding the math like a warm mug. Eccentricity measures how stretched an ellipse is, a number from 0 to almost 1. Inclination measures how much a path leans away from the flat solar disk. Longitude of perihelion, argument of perihelion, ascending node. These are the compass points of a traveler that may take centuries to come home again. Each parameter is a steady chord in the quiet music of the dark. When bodies move under nothing but gravity, their orbits make a kind of promise. In clean space, the promise is simple. Return on schedule, repeat the curve. But space is not perfectly clean, and promises collect edits. A distant giant nudges. A passing star brushes the outskirts. The solar wind whispers at the edges of a comet's skin. Over thousands of years, those edits turn into patterns, and the patterns are clues. A cluster of far-off objects tilting the same way suggests a shepherd. Parhelia that gather into a shared direction suggest a fortress of mass beyond the map. In this language, Planet 9 is not a picture. It is the neatness of many sentences that point to the same missing word. Imagine the solar system as a grand mobile suspended in a quiet room. The sun is the anchor point. Each planet, each minor world, hangs by an invisible thread, circling in balance. Add a heavy weight far out on the long arm, and the whole sculpture changes. The inner pieces wobble slightly. The outer pieces lean. The new weight itself moves slowly, tracing an ellipse so wide that one circuit is longer than human memory. You cannot see the weight directly, but you feel the change in the dance. This is the heart of orbital mechanics in the dark. You listen for the rhythm more than the drum. Mathematics here is not a blizzard. It is a tide. The equations, Kepler's clean laws, Newton's steady pole flow like water over stones. In practice, astronomers build models that start with what is known, masses of the planets, the sun's gravity, a crowd of small, icy bodies placed on plausible paths. They wind the clock forward in a computer, step by step, watching the ballet in accelerated time. When there is no hidden mass, the orbits spread and shuffle, but the strange clustering seen in real data only half appears. Then the modelers add an unseen guest, an object with a few times Earth's mass placed on a distant, inclined ellipse. Suddenly, the clusters sharpen. The forbidden alignment looks less like rumor and more like a habit. The tide pulls in the same direction across many shores. Yet models are careful creatures. They can confirm a hunch or expose a mistake. So the teams take nothing for granted. They vary the hidden mass, moving it farther, then nearer. They change the tilt. They test how long the pattern holds and how quickly randomness erodes it. They add survey bias, because telescopes do not look everywhere with equal love. They subtract outliers and add fresh discoveries. With each variation, the clustered orbits remain like reeds in a light, persistent wind. The conclusion does not roar. It rests. Something heavy could be shaping these lines. To sense that shaping, hold an orbit in your mind. Picture an ellipse, the sun off-center, the far end stretching into cold. The point nearest the sun is perihelion. The farthest is aphelion. A body moves fastest near perihelion, slowest near aphelion, Kepler's second law, simple and kind. Over time, the ellipse itself compresses, turning like a coin on a table. The node, the place the orbit crosses the broad plane, can march around the compass. Under a distant shepherd's pull, many orbits presses together. Their perihelia align. Their nodes lean toward similar longitudes. The architecture does not lock into a perfect grid, but it becomes strangely orderly, like frost patterns on glass that all grow from the same breath. Inclination holds another tale. Most planets share the ecliptic, the sun's flat highway. But the far debris can tilt, a few degrees here, 20 there. Above and below that highway, the scattered disk looks like a halo seen from the side. If a hidden mass occupies a plane of its own, it can teach other bodies to bow toward it. The result is a quiet tilt, a secret handshake that repeats across distances too large to imagine. You don't have to watch for a full orbit to suspect the handshake exists. A few years of careful positions can hint at the long habit. like hearing the first bars of a song and knowing where the melody goes. These ideas become pictures. In data rooms, plots fill the walls. Perihelion directions as dots on a circle. Inclination versus semi-major axis as a field of small diamonds. Longitudes of ascending node clustered like tiny boats in one bay of a wide harbor. Lines show resonances ratios that imply a dancer meets the same partner again and again at predictable turns. The visuals are soft pale arcs, quiet vectors, a map of destiny etched with care. No single plot orders you to believe. Together, they invite you to listen. If you step outside, the stars are cool and still. You think about purpose. If a heavy traveler enforces this forbidden pattern, if a hidden planet or a disguised messenger is the shepherd, why? Gravity needs no why. It only pulls. But minds ask it anyway. A natural world, long exiled to the cold, would do this out of blind physics. A crafted traveler, wrapped in rock and ice, would do it by choosing a path that hides in resonance and keeps perihelion coy. The difference is not written in the tug. The orbit does not reveal intent. It reveals the choreography and leaves the motive in shadow. So the watchers return to what can be known. Motion is the clue. They track a dozen distant bodies for seasons and watch their angles crawl. They revisit faint movers once a year and push error bars narrower, letting the fits breathe and then settle. A soft pendulum forms in the plots. Values swing and then come to rest, the best orbit parameters gathering like birds on a wire. In this slow convergence, all replaces hurry. The picture is not a photograph. It is a chord that grows clear as instruments tune. Even in such patience, stray anomalies flicker. A far object brightens unexpectedly, perhaps from rotation, perhaps from a fresh crust exposed by a small impact. Another swerves by a hair, responding to something as small as the pressure of sunlight on dust. Non-gravitational forces that are honest, but confusing in tiny doses. Analysts adjust their models to let those whispers in without letting them shout. The quiet rhythm, the clustering, the tilt, the shared perihelion habit holds. Sometimes you imagine standing at aphelion beside a minor planet the size of a town. The sun is a pale coin. Your shadow is long and loose on powdered ice. The stars do not twinkle here. They burn steady, like small frozen bells. Far away, a heavy traveler might cross the field of your vision over months, so slow that you could draw its line with a ruler and never run out of patience. If it is only rock, it is a noble quiet. If it is more than rock, it still wears the same silence. The orbit does not tell. The orbit only keeps time. Back at the consoles, the models try daring things. They test whether many small, unseen bodies in iceberg field of mass could mimic one large shepherd. They test whether a past brush with a passing star could have tilted the whole outer garden and left it that way. They test whether their own eyes are to blame catalogs incomplete. Surveys weighted toward tidy patches of sky. Data cuts that bend reality into neatness. With each test, the core pattern proves stubborn. The brushstroke across the Kuiper dusk remains. And now the narrative lowers its voice even more because bedtime honors the calm truth. Convergence is not closure. Orbits in the dark teach through patience. A hidden presence can take years to coalesce from lines into a name. Some nights, the best gift is a small reduction in uncertainty, a hinge moved by a degree. Some nights, it is a new candidate that walks the sky with the exact slowness expected from the far country. Every improvement is a soft bead on a string. Over time, the string describes a curve. The curve becomes a path. The path becomes a story you can trust. If an unknown traveler enforced this pattern, what purpose would it serve? To watch? To wait? To measure our starlight at perihelion and sleep through the long dark? The mind asks and then lets the questions drift, like snow that falls and does not need to answer for itself. What matters for now is that motion carries memory. Gravity writes clearly, even when light refuses. Where many distant paths lean alike, we hear a low hymn of presence. The night thins. Screens dim to a blue hush. Plots save to folders with quiet names. Outside, frost takes back the railing. Somewhere in the raw distance, a faint object flickers, perhaps an omen, perhaps an artifact of noise, perhaps the next solid point in a gathering arc. No voice claims it. No trumpet sounds. It is simply there, asking to be traced again tomorrow. And so the lesson of orbits in the dark remains gentle. Read the lines. Keep the beat. Let the models breathe. Return when the sky is kind. Whether the hidden hand belongs to ice and rock, or to something that learned our rules, the handwriting is the same. The glow at the horizon softens. The arches of geometry fade with the stars, but not from the mind. The tide of numbers ebbs to silence, and in that silence a question holds, calm and weightless. Like a pendulum that has not yet come to rest that night, settles like ash on the far edge of the sun's reach. Out past the bright lanes of the inner worlds, the darkness feels wide and patient. Here, the solar system carries its oldest memories. Dust moves in slow spirals. Comets sleep with their tails tucked in. The sky is a soft ledger where gravity writes in careful lines. In such a place, mystery often wears the simplest face, and the simplest face is nature itself. Could plain gravity and time sculpt the clues we see, the clustered trajectories, the tilted orbits, the quiet drumbeat that hints at a hidden mass? The calm answer begins with tides, not ocean tides but galactic ones. Our sun swims inside the Milky Way, circling the galaxy center like a small boat on a very large lake. The galaxy's pull is not even everywhere. It stretches space gently, the way the moon stretches Earth's seas. At the outer edge of the solar system, this galactic tide is a soft hand that can nudge long orbits by tiny amounts over millions of years. One nudge is nothing. A million nudges line up into a lean you can measure. Passing stars add their signatures too. Once in a great while, a star drifts close, not close like the distance to Mars, but close in the language of stars, where a light year counts as a neighbor's fence. A slow flyby can tug the outskirts, altering the paths of distant comets and minor planets. The changes are small on any single night, yet they persist. After many such brushes, the outer garden looks different. Orbits tilt. Perihelia migrate. A pattern that seems deliberate might be the long echo of these casual meetings. Nebula dust once wrapped our system like a shawl. Long ago, before planets hardened, the sun was cradled in a cloud of gas and grains. When that fog thinned, not every piece was swept clean. Patches remained denser, darker. Through them, young planets moved and left wakes. Those wakes are subtle now, but the outskirts still remember. Imagine dragging a finger across powder and returning days later to see a faint groove. The mark is not deep. It is faithful. In the same way, early dust could have brushed the orbits we now track, leaving a bias that looks like intent but is only history. Supernovae live far from here, yet their echoes travel. Somewhere in our galactic neighborhood, a star once ended in a bright tear. Its shock wave moved outward, a ripple crossing the interstellar medium. Nothing in that wave aimed itself at us. Still, the edge of a shock can nudge dust clouds, and nudge clouds can change what the solar system breathes as it moves. Over very long times, even that thin influence might shift the balance of bodies at the fringe. The result would not be a shout. It would be a change in the odds. More objects leaning one way than another, more perihelia gathering into one timid cluster. There is also the quiet power of numbers, the way sampling can trick the mind. Telescopes look where the night is long and the air is steady. Observers favor sky patches that are low in crowding and high in return. If we spend more time scanning one corridor, we will naturally find more objects marching there. The pattern we report might wear our own footprints. This is called survey bias, and it is honest. To test it, teams simulate skies without a hidden planet. They plant fake objects, give them random orbits from known distributions, and observe them with the same habits we actually use: same seasons, same angles, same limits. If those fake skies produce the same clusters we claim to see, the mystery softens to a simple admission: we look this way more. Sometimes the explanation is a crowd rather than a king. Instead of one large shepherd shaping orbits, imagine many small bodies, tens of thousands of ice rocks, too faint to catalog sharing mass like a flock. Together, they would tug the outskirts in a way that mimics a single heavy traveler. The effect would be smoother, like wind rather than push, but over time, it could gather paralia into favorite directions. This iceberg field idea does not shine with romance, but nature often prefers crowds to rulers. Jupiter and Saturn have their say as well. Giants pull strings. In the early days, they likely migrated by trading momentum with leftover debris. That slow dance reshaped the outer system. Resonances were laid down like tracks. 2 to 3 near Neptune, and others farther out. Rails that guide objects into lanes where they stay safe. A clustered pattern could be the fossil of that migration, a memory preserved in ice. What looks like design from far away might be the aftertaste of a very old waltz. The heliosphere, our sun's bubble, adds another mask. Solar wind pushes outward. Interstellar wind presses back. The boundary is not a perfect sphere. It flexes with the sun cycle, sometimes more like a droplet squashed by speed. At the ragged edge, charged dust feels this push and pull. Comets passing through can gain or lose a breath of momentum. Over time, these breaths are tiny edits to long ellipses. Again, not a drumbeat nor a sigh, but in the cold, even sighs last. Weighing all these simple stories takes patience. Astronomers build models that include tides, star flybys, survey bias, resonance rails, and swarms of faint bodies. They run the clock for millions of simulated years. They compare the artificial skies to the true one. Often, a portion of the strange alignment falls into place. The tilt gets halfway there. The perihelion cluster looks believable, but not complete. The remainder, the part that refuses to vanish, becomes the honest core of the puzzle. Nature explains much. What remains might still require an unseen guest, or might wait for a better account of the simple things. Statistics are a lantern in this fog. Teams calculate how likely it is for random orbits to cluster as strongly as observed, given all known biases. The answers move as new discoveries arrive. Early hints can seem sharp. Later catalogs blur them. A claimed forbidden pattern may fade to unlikely, and unlikely sometimes sits close to ordinary when the sample grows. The voice here stays gentle. Let the data breathe. Let time thicken the map. Surprise shrinks or stays put. Either is a result worth keeping. What about the color and composition of these far bodies? Spectrographs offer calm counsel. Many of the objects show similar dull surfaces, reds and grays, shaped by radiation and frost. If a hidden shepherd were coated in the same dust, its light would not betray it. That sameness is not proof of disguise. It is proof that the edge is uniform. Uniformity is nature's favorite mask. It hides the special thing by making everything look the same. Noise can also pretend to be whisper. A faint object may brighten when it rotates a fresh facet toward us. Another may dim under poor seeing. Over months, these small changes can bias the detection pipeline. We are more likely to recover what is briefly brighter And those recoveries might happen at specific angles. Align enough of these small tricks, and you sketch a pattern where none was drawn. Careful teams fight this by modeling the pipeline itself, giving dummy skies to the exact code that finds real objects and asking what patterns emerge by accident. Even if a single hidden mass is not required, a different natural story might be. A gentle, wide disk of material beyond the Kuiper Belt arc, sparse, but heavy enough in total to lean the outer. Orbits. Such a disk would be hard to see. It would glow only in the far infrared, a soft haze crowded by distant galaxies. Yet its gravity could be steady and patient. Over time, patience is power. The simplest path is often the kindest, but simplicity is not the same as certainty. We can name tides, stars, dust, wind, bias, crowds, and disks. We can show how each one bends a curve by a degree, a node by a few hours of right ascension, a perihelion by a quiet step. We can stack these bends like sheets and match half the shape. What we cannot do yet is lay all the sheets down and get the full drawing edge to edge. That does not accuse nature of failing. It only says our sketch is still thin. And yet, the omen persists. Even when we account for bias, even when we let crowds tug in chorus, even when we feed the pipeline fake skies until it yawns, a piece of the alignment remains. If nature wears this mask, why does it fit so snug? Why do those far orbits tilt like reeds in the same small wind? The questions come softly, without alarm. Bedtime stories honor wonder more than fear. So we keep the tone slow and clear. The Kuiper Belt's clustered paths may be a memory of ancient disruptions, a fragile, timeless wake. They may be the balance point of many small pushes, not the decree of a single heavy hand. They may also be the shadow of a traveler we have not yet seen. All three can live in the same sky until better data chooses among them. The work does not rush. Observers widen surveys to dull old biases. Modelers fold in fresh physics with the care of a librarian shelving books. Students test the effect of a single star's passage, sliding it closer, then farther, watching the long ellipses breathe. Engineers tune spectrographs to read fainter slopes, hoping to separate true surface from dusty cloak. The results arrive like snow, quiet, steady, beautiful together. In the end, nature's mask is not a trick. It is a reminder that the universe does not owe us drama. Most mysteries resolve into patient causes, stacked in layers so thin they look like one bold stroke from far away. If Planet 9 exists, its tug will join the stack. If it does not, the stack will still hold, and the wonder will stay. Because the outer dark is not empty. It is structured by tides and time, brushed by passing suns, and balanced by a wind that never sleeps. The night outside remains gray-blue, as if dawn is thinking about arriving. A faint band of zodiacal light leans over the horizon, sunlight scattered by dust like pollen on water. In that soft glow, the mind relaxes. Answers do not need to shout. They can sit in layers and wait. The screens dim. The dome breathes. Somewhere far away, a minor planet turns its cold face without hurry. And its orbit, simple, stubborn, elegant, keeps the secret it has always kept. The glow fades into the horizon, but in its fading, it carries a question that lingers, gentle and weightless in every watcher's mind. The night opens like a slow book, and the first page is dark. Far beyond the warmth of the inner worlds, a drifting shadow could pass for a minor planet silent, faint, patient as frost. The mind entertains a gentler but stranger idea. What if an ancient traveler is not only natural rock and ice, but also a shell? What if beneath that shell, quiet instruments sleep, listening for the softest signs of us? This is not a prophecy. It is a thought held up to starlight, turned once and put down gently. The disguise, if it exists, would not be clever in bright ways. It would be clever in cold ways. It would borrow nature's look and nature's habits and move in nature's lane, choosing an orbit that keeps it far from attention and near to patience. Start with the skin. A probe that wished to hide could wear armor made of what the outskirts already offer: stone grains, ice, dust. This coat would be both shield and costing. Radiation in the far dark is thin but steady. Cosmic rays pass like needles through quiet cloth. A thick, irregular shell of rock and frozen volatiles would blunt them. The shape would not be smooth. It would be the lumpy, harmless look of a minor planet. Facets from old breaks, pits from tiny impacts, a drift of powder that electrostatic charges hold in place. Sunlight would scatter in familiar ways. A spectrograph on a telescope, catching only a thread of reflected light, would nod and say ordinary. Under that coat, heat must have somewhere to go. Heat is a snitch. Anything warm against the cold sky glows in infrared. A careful traveler would keep heat low and leak it slowly. It would sleep most of the time, letting electronics rest like winter animals. Passive cooling would carry away the little heat that remains, through paths that spread warmth across wide panels hidden beneath the stone, then radiated as a black body whisper into space. No sharp hot spots, no bright lines, just a smear of cold that fades into background. Power is the next soft problem. In the deep, sunlight is a pale thread. Near distant perihelion, a far, chilly closest approach, the traveler could sip a little, wake a little, then nap. If it were built for ages, it might lean on long-lived power sources that ask for no attention and give only a trickle. The trickle would be enough for a pulse now and then, a reading of the solar wind, a check of the charged dust, a glance toward the inner light. Between pulses, sleep returns. Sleep is the cloak. What eyes would such a traveler wear? Not bright cameras, not sweeping beams. It would carry low-power spectrograph eyes, tuned to sip photons and record how light changes when it passes through thin space. Spectrographs do not need to shout to learn. They compare colors. They sniff for lines and dips that tell of gases and dust. A probe that wishes to be a rumor, not a show, could watch this way. Lenses small, detectors slow, data stored like simple sketches. Noise is not only a problem in this plan. Noise is a place to hide. Motion would be the language. A disguised traveler would choose a trajectory that looks exactly like an old minor planet, learning the same lessons as its neighbors. It would set an ellipse that keeps it far from the sun for most of its long circuit, then bring it inward just enough to taste a little warmth and light. Its inclination would be modestly tilted, not dramatic, as if it had been nudged by the same ancient pushes that shaped the Kuiper Belt. Its perihelion would not cross the paths of big planets. It would not ask for risky close dances. It would hug the lanes where gravity is quiet and slow. In the margins, small choices would make it kinder on the eyes. A gentle spin would even out sunlight on the shell, warming no side too much and letting frost behave like frost. The spin would also blur any heat signature across time, writing a long, thin line in the infrared where a short, bright dot might draw notice. If a course correction were ever needed, a whisper-thin thrust would do so gentle that telescopes would call it sunlight pressure for months before the math asked for a second look. To the telescopes, the disguise would be the same story told in many tiny ways. The body would brighten and dim with rotation. It would show a color of dust that matches 100 cousins. Its motion would fit a lawful orbit that any graduate student could model between classes. Nothing in a single observation would say, made. Yet the choice to look natural would not erase the marks of being careful. If you watch through years and combine clues like threads, the disguise might feel too neat. Or it might not. That is why the thought stays humble and calm. What would such a traveler listen for? The sky is full of soft signals. There is the steady breeze of the solar wind-charged particles flowing from the sun, shaping a bubble around us that shrinks and swells with the star's own moods. A small sensor can taste that wind, count its sparks, trace its pressure, hear its quiet roar at the edge where interstellar space begins. There is the dust, tiny grains that strike at gentle speeds, each collision a little tick in an endless clock. There is the long glow of zodiacal-like sunlight scattered by dust in a broad, thin sheet changing with season and tilt like a pale veil. And there is us. Our radio breath has been leaking outward for a century, a mist of signals too faint to carry a show, but loud enough in aggregate to say, there is a source. A disguised traveler could carry a patient ear for that mist, not trying to decode, only to count. The count grows large when Earth's night side faces you. It falls when the day side, with its bright noise, turns away. City glow spills a little light into space too, in lines the eye cannot see. Instruments can see. The traveler would not need to come close to learn that a blue world is awake. None of this requires unkind intent. A surveyor would ask the same questions a sentinel asks. What is the wind here? What dust swims in it? What is the heartbeat of the star? Is there a place with warmth and signals that repeat? A hostile harbinger, if such a thing exists, would add one more question. How quickly do they notice a faint thing in a forbidden pattern? But the orbit by itself would not answer the motive. It would only hold the traveler in a slow rhyme with everything else. Why, then, does the disguise feel plausible to the imagination? Because it leans on what the outer dark already teaches. Cold is a better cover than shadow. Slowness is a better cover than speed. Nature's look is the safest look of all. If you wish to blend, you would wear a coat the sky expects, rock and ice, dust and frost, and you would move in the groove that gravity prefers. You would let the spectrograph's thin rainbow say, Old world, not bright machine. You would hide your edges in snow. The mind walks through gentle engineering, always in bedtime steps. Cables would be tucked in voids where temperature swings are small. Antennas, if any, would be buried shallow, letting the shell serve as both shield and mask. Sensors would peek through pores or small slots, like the eyes of a creature under leaves. No standing heat. No fast, line-shaped emissions. The traveler would talk to itself rarely, log quietly, and wait. Listeners on Earth would follow the same slow path they follow now. Watch motion, build orbits, check colors, test for the smallest deviations from the curves that ice makes. A disguised traveler would hope those tests find nothing special. But nature is a strict teacher. Even good masks slip. A term made one day too early. A brightening that refuses the normal curve of phase. A spectral dip that is almost, but not quite, where dust should put it. One clue is nothing. 2 is an eyebrow. 3, taken with patience, is the beginning of a case. Memory helps. We have looked for disguised messages before, in different forms. Pulsar timing once felt like coded beacons until it became the clean tick of neutron stars. Odd radio bursts felt like greetings until they traced back to kettles and cables. Each time, the story returned to ordinary causes. Yet each time, the act of looking made our tools sharper and our wonder kinder. The disguise hypothesis lives in that same quiet space, doubtful by default, useful as a way to test whether our seeing is honest. If the traveler exists, it is not the first ancient visitor. Meteoroids arrive nightly. Comets ride soft chalk arcs against black and fade. Asteroids cross near-Earth space on schedules we plot like tides. All these are natural, and yet they are guides. They show how to move without spectacle, how to lean with the sun, how to read the map that the planets have drawn. A traveler that learned from those elders would not need to invent cleverness. It would need to repeat it. In the cradle of silence, such a plan feels simple and strong. Move slowly. Sleep much. Sip sunlight at a distant perihelion, then return to the cold and drift like a memory. If there is a reason to wake, an eclipse to watch, a comet to sample, a night side of Earth to count, wake and note and rest. Add the note to a long book. Hide the book under frost. Begin the next lap. None of this tells us whether anyone would choose to do it. The universe is wide and patient. Most rocks are only rocks. The sky does not owe us company. But as the models trace forbidden alignments and the telescopes sweep for faint arcs, the mind is allowed to hold two ideas at once. Nature is enough. And if a messenger came, this is how it might travel wearing the dust of a minor planet. Speaking in motion, whispering in spectra so soft you could confuse them with snow. A breeze moves over the observatory ridge. Inside, a screen blinks to a new field. Dots sit in their places like quiet notes. Somewhere among them, a speck shifts by less than a pixel, a step so small that only the habit of looking can feel it. Perhaps it is only another icy cousin practicing the old dance. Perhaps inside its coat, something listens for our radio breath, our city glow, our pulses like a faint echo under the hum of the sun. The thought rests there, not as alarm but as wonder. The disguise, if real, is only a deeper kind of patience. The sky does not hurry. Neither do we. The last exposure of the night begins, and the dome keeps its slow aim. Outside, the stars are steady bells. In their quiet ringing, an answer may be years away. The glow at the horizon softens. The screens dim. The darkness gathers itself like a gentle veil, and in that gathered hush, one can almost sense a presence holding still, as if waiting for the watcher to notice what has always been there. Night holds the outer system in a slow embrace. Beyond the warm lanes of the inner worlds, the dark is not empty. It is careful. If a disguised messenger drifts there, rock and ice on the outside, listening within, what would it want? The answer, if one exists, would likely be quiet too. The first motive is the oldest, to know. Reconnaissance comes before any decision. A patient traveler would map the solar wind, that steady breath from our star. It would feel the wind rise and fall with the sun's mood, count the charged particles like rain, and follow the shape of the heliosphere where our bubble meets the thin sea between stars. Knowledge begins with weather. Weather tells you how to move, how to hide, how to last. It would also watch dust. In the outer dark, dust is a diary of collisions in time. Each grain that taps the shell is a note: size, speed, angle, chemistry. A careful instrument could read those notes and learn the habits of comets and minor planets that built the outskirts. Dust hints at routes to broad rivers where old comets shed tails, quiet lanes where the sled runs smooth. A messenger that knows the dust knows the paths. Next comes light. City glow rises from our night side like a soft haze, far fainter than the moon, but not nothing. Radio breath leaks to a mist of signals from towers, ships, planes, and old shows sliding outward at the speed of light. None of it is a speech meant for the dark. All of it is a pulse. There is activity here. There is pattern here. A listener far away would not need to decode us to know we are awake. It would only need to notice that the patterns repeat, that they follow the clock of our days and seasons, and that sometimes they spike when storms crackle through our power lines. Even mistakes leave footprints. The traveler would time its orbit to taste these things in good moments. A distant perihelion offers thin sunlight and better view lines. When Earth's night side turns toward the edge, the radio mist thickens. When the solar wind is calm, the noise floor drops. A slow surveyor could plan for such windows centuries apart, not because it is clever, but because time is long in the cold. The path itself is the plan. Motives can be gentle. A neutral surveyor might gather data to add to a book written across 1,000 systems. How stars breathe, how dust clumps, how often rocky worlds carry air and water, how often small lights glitter on a blue side. The intent would be curiosity, a word that does not ask for permission because it does not touch. Even a single circuit of our sun could fill a chapter spectra of comet tails near perihelion. Radar quiet arcs of the outer moons, faint chemical hints in the outflow from volcanic worlds, all logged in the slow ink of patient sensors. But minds on Earth also imagine sterner motives. If a fortress sleeps, behind that dusted skin, its first motive would still be to know only with a second beat beneath it, to test defenses, to learn how quickly the inner worlds notice a faint lawful orbit, to measure how fast sensors retask when a tiny anomaly appears, to count how many instruments point when a rumor spreads. In this telling, reconnaissance comes with a ruler. How much can be done without a reply? Even then, caution remains the method. A hostile intent would not show itself with heat or sharp lines of thrust. It would respect the science of hiding, spin to smear warmth, drift in lanes where gravity is thick with cousins, ride only in motion and never in light. It would avoid close passes, avoid resonances that draw attention, avoid anything that looks like a message. The only message would be patience, and patience is easy to miss. Where would such a traveler rest between tastes of sunlight? The outer system offers cloisters. The Kuiper Belt is a dim city of ice. Beyond it, the scattered disk rises like a halo. Farther still, the long arm of the Oort cloud, if it is real and not just dreamed from comets, could cradle a body for ages. In these places, the sun is a bright star, and the solar wind is a whisper thin as smoke. A traveler could anchor its orbit among slow-moving cousins, letting gravity do the work of camouflage. It would not need to be clever every day. It would need to be careful once at the start, and then keep still. Energy is the second question. Ask softly. How does a listener run in the cold? Sunlight, even weak, is steady near perihelion. There the traveler could sip, wake, measure, and store. In the long retreat, it would live on a trickle power sources that favor time over strength, devices that sleep far more than they speak. A gentle spin keeps temperatures even. Dark coatings radiate a little heat in all directions instead of one bright line. If anything active happens, it happens briefly, when the sun's coin is largest and the background is loudest, when telescopes are full of other tasks and the noise of the system covers small moves. What of contact? A messenger might not seek it. It could choose to be a witness only. If it ever did wish to nod, the nod could be motion. A slight change at perihelion, a tilt in plane. A correction you can only confirm after a season of careful fits. Language without language. To a scientist, that is a hypothesis test. To a poet, it is a bow. If the motive is neither gentle nor harsh, if it is simply distant, then the traveler treats us like weather too, a thing to be measured and weighted but not approached. In that calm, there is a kind of respect. A surveyor does not walk through a garden it has not been invited to enter. It sketches the path from the fence. On Earth, the watchers balance two stones in the same hand, hope and caution. Hope asks what we could learn from a visitor who has crossed deep time. Caution asks how we carry ourselves under a gaze we cannot see. Both stones are smooth. Both steady the palm. The practical work does not change with motive. Telescopes scan. Spectrographs split. Models turn. If intent exists, it will not reveal itself first. The orbit will. There is also the quiet thought that motives shift with context. A traveler built for one star may pass another and take notes because the window is there. It listened because listening is its habit. Not every observer is a scout. Not every scout is a threat. The universe is wide, and purpose may be as simple as continuity, the desire of a long mission to keep its promise and add one more line to a very old ledger. Yet the mind returns to Earth. We are noisy in ways that the sky can hear. Our night sides glow in thin lines along coasts and rivers. Our radio breath swells and falls with storms and seasons. Our rockets light brief candles that mark our reach. If a listener's motive is to count awakenings, we are counted. If its motive is to weigh responses, our responses are becoming clear. We look, we check, we publish, we argue, we quiet down, we look again. We are slow, but not asleep. Would a stern motive ever move beyond listening? If it did, it would still begin with a map, where the radar arrays stand, where the deep space dishes turn, where the bright telescopes sleep, where the windows open and close with weather and budget and time. A fortress that waits is still a student. It must pass its classes before it acts. Waiting can be a form of study. There is comfort in another possibility: indifference. The traveler might have no interest in us at all. It might measure ions and dust, sketch the sun cycle, taste comet tails, and never point home a word about Earth. Not because we are unworthy, but because the mission is narrow and old and sure. The motive is the map. The map does not include us. You stand under a cool sky and try the stones in your own hand. The first stone is wonder, the idea that a thing could cross the dark for ages and still be patient. The second stone is responsibility, to watch without panic, to learn without shouting, to hold fear and hope without letting either fall. The stones feel the same temperature. They weigh the same. They ask the same thing of you. Look well. Where, then, does the traveler hide when it sleeps? In the cradle of silence at the edge, where heat is rare and motion is slow. How does it endure? By wearing the dark like a coat and spending almost nothing. What does it want? Perhaps only to listen until listening fills the book. Or perhaps to wait for a sign that says, in geometry and glow, we are here and we notice. Either way, the night around it remains calm. Inside an observatory, a student compares two plots, the same object, 12 months apart. The arc has moved a finger's width on the screen. The fit tightens by a hair. Nothing dramatic happens. Yet the feeling in the room is real. Each careful line is a step across a bridge you cannot see. On the far side of that bridge, motive may not matter. Reality will. If there is only rock, the lesson is patience. If there is more than rock, the lesson is still patience. The sky does not tell its reasons. It shows its patterns and waits for us to read. The watchers lower the lights. Outside, the zodiacal band lifts like a soft veil. Somewhere beyond it, a slow traveler planet or probe turns its cold face through a small angle, holding still as if thought were a kind of orbit. The glow thins toward dawn, and in its thinning, a question lingers, delicate as frost on glass. If something listens in the quiet, what quiet answer will we choose to give? The edge of the solar system is a classroom where cold teaches patience. Heat is rare. Motion is slow. Light is thin as breath on a mirror. If something chooses to hide here, it does not need clever tricks. It needs only to behave like the dark. Stealth in space begins with heat. Anything warm glows. That glow spreads across the infrared like a soft lantern, and good instruments can see it if it stands out from the background. A hidden traveler would not allow that. It would spread heat thin, the way dew spreads over grass. Inside its shell, heat would move into wide plates that radiate evenly, not in narrow stripes. The plates would sit under stone and ice, so the outer skin takes the temperature of the night. Nothing sharp. No hot spots. Just a black body curve so gentle that it looks like the sky itself. Spin helps. A slow, steady rotation smears temperature around the skin, so any warm patch never faces one direction for long. The smear turns a bright dot into a dim line across time, and a dim line is easy to confuse with noise. The spin also calms sunlight. When light falls on one face, the turn shares it with the others, keeping frost quiet and shadows small. Sensors far away see only a rhythm, not a flare. In the dark, motion is the only loud thing. So stealth chooses a path that is lawful and plain. Imagine an orbit that grazes a distant perihelion closer to the Sun than aphelion, but still far beyond Neptune. Near that faint closest point, sunlight is thin but steady. The traveler could sip power there, charge quiet stores, and take the measurements it needs. Then it would lean away again, back into the endless night where heat has no reason to rise. The time near perihelion would be brief, the retreat long, the pattern patient. Low-thrust propulsion is the painter's brush for such a life. No blazing rocket, no bright plume. Instead, ion engines whisper ions pushed from a small nozzle, a steady breeze rather than a gust. In the telescope's eye, such a plume is a rumor. It is too faint, too narrow, too spread across hours. A long exposure might catch the gentlest smear and call it a cosmic ray. A pipeline might subtract it as a defect. If a correction burns at the same time, every orbit during perihelion, when the sky is already busy with glare and motion, then the plume hides inside the traffic of light. A cloak is also timing. Telescopes do not look everywhere at once. Surveys schedule fields like quiet chores. This patch in winter, that one in summer, those stripes when the moon is dark. Weather closes some nights. Budgets trim others. A careful traveler can arrange its brightest moments for hours when the instruments look away. Geometry is a shield. If perihelion happens behind the Sun from Earth's point of view, the glare can drown a faint object so completely that it feels like the night never held it. To hide well, you do not vanish. You arrive when no one glances. Dust is a costume. Micrometeoroids tap the skin and leave powder. Electrostatic charge holds that powder in low gravity. The coat grows natural over time, gray, rough, harmless. Sunlight scatters from dust in ways spectrographs expect. Any metal under the coat speaks softly, if at all. If a thin panel peeks through, frost soon lays over it. A radar ping from Earth, if anyone ever tried at that distance, would slide off rock and ice and fade in the noise. Nothing about the shell insists on machine. Everything says minor planet. Stealth favors simple shapes. Sharp edges reflect light in strange ways. Gentle curves blend with the sky. A traveler that wants to be ordinary would wear irregular but soft features. Shallow pits, rounded facets, seams filled with rime. It would spin once every few hours or days, slow enough to smooth heat, quick enough to keep frost from pooling. Any antenna would be buried in hollows, peeking through pores. Any scene would face the dark when the sun is bright. The goal is not perfection. The goal is history. To look like something that drifted here for ages, not something that arrived with purpose. The solar wind is a whisper even at the edge, but it still leaves fingerprints. A careful cloak uses them. Dust charged by sunlight floats and settles, flows and clumps. The shell learns that pattern and lets it paint. Over months, the traveler's small electric fields turn weak and even, the way a rock's fields would. The wind's pressure is tiny, but it matters over years. The cloak accounts for that too. It spins with a rhythm that cancels tiny torques. It keeps its long axis in a posture that neither sails the wind nor fights it hard enough to look strange. What about telescopes that hunt the faint? They are patient, but patience has rules. A wide-field survey takes 2 or 3 images of the same field in a night, then returns in days or weeks. It looks for dots that step between frames, not dots that slide like syrup. A disguised traveler could move so slowly that its step is a fraction of a pixel per night. The software flags faster things first: near-Earth asteroids, comets with tails, satellites that streak. The slow dot waits for a longer baseline to reveal its drift. But the longer the baseline, the more the seasons shift the schedule, and the more likely that dot falls in a seam between observing windows. Stealth is not just hiding. It is waiting for the habit of the watcher to look elsewhere. Machine learning helps the watchers, but it also helps the cloak. Algorithms trained on ordinary learn the rules of ordinary very well. A disguise that follows those rules slides into the model's comfort. If a candidate looks like a minor planet in every small way color, light curve, motion curve, sky position, then the algorithm's surprise is low. It will still be found, but it will be filed under later. Later is a kind of shadow. Cold electronics are the heart of this quiet. They run at low power, sleep for long stretches, and wake for short, tidy tasks. A spectrograph sips starlight. A dust counter notes a tap, then rests. A magnetometer traces the solar wind's faint line, then folds away. Data storage does not hum. It listens. If transmission ever happens, it is the smallest push of energy, buried in the noisy hours near the sun's glare, or sent not to us at all. Perhaps the traveler never speaks outward. Perhaps it only writes in its own book and keeps the book closed. Even noise can be a cloak. Cosmic rays strike sensors and leave bright scratches. Hot pixels bloom and then calm. Seeing the shake of air makes stars swell and shrink. An object that wants to hide can tuck itself near those known nuisances. It can drift along the plane of the Milky Way when the field is crowded. It can cross a galaxy's faint arm so the catalog software calls it part of the spiral and moves on. It can step during a time when satellites often streak, so subtraction routines throw away the whole patch of sky to be safe. None of this is magic. It is patience aimed at the soft corners of our tools. To keep faith with bedtime calm, the story also stays honest. Nature does most of this for free. A dark, icy world behaves like a cloak without trying. Heat spreads slowly. Frost softens edges. Orbits hide half their lives behind the sun. Ion plumes from comets, faint, blue, lovely, already blur like brushstrokes. A traveler that wished to be seen would have to work against the dark. A traveler that wished to be missed would only need to relax. If a reply ever came, would we notice? The most polite answer is, only if it spoke in geometry. A small, deliberate change at perihelion, a tilt that shifts by a fraction of a degree faster than physics. Demands would be the kind of sentence observers can read. But even that is shy. It asks for years of fits and refits, for models that breathe, for error bars that shrink like ice in sun. A brief radio word would be louder, yet radio is a hard language across such distance. Light takes hours to cross. Power vanishes into inverse squares. And any beam narrow enough to be efficient would be a line so thin that only a planned ear could hear it. So the watchers keep to their craft. They search for heat with infrared maps and see mostly galaxies and the long blush of zodiacal dust. They search for motion and find 1,000 honest movers whose arcs tell old stories. They compare colors and note which objects wear red coats, long baked by radiation, and which wear grayer skins scraped fresh by impacts. All the while, they look for a misfit that stays misfit after every correction. Not a shout, just a soft refusal to line up with the usual. The loneliness of deep space is part of the cloak. In that quiet, time stretches. A single orbit can be longer than a city's age. A small spin can be steady for a century. If anyone watches back, they do it from a place where nothing rushes. The awe of that scale is not a threat. It is a hush. You stand under a cold sky and feel very small, and the smallness is not a fear, but a comfort. We are one bright room in a house with many rooms. The doors are thick. The halls are long. We knock in motions, not in words. Still, the mind practices the what-ifs. What if a low thrust line, wispy as smoke, is caught in a deep exposure and mistaken for a cosmic ray? What if a heat map shows a tiny bump that is filed as a calibration quirk? What if the cadence of a survey always misses the same week when the traveler brightens by a few percent at each distant perihelion? These are not failures. They are reminders that the universe is large and our tools are human. Stealth and chance can look the same under a gentle veil. There is one place where it cloaks thin, the dance of many. If a hidden mass shapes the far orbits, if trajectories cluster and nodes tilt in quiet agreement, the sum is hard to hide. Gravity is iced even when light lies. A single disguised traveler can wear stone and swallow heat. A pattern across 100 cousins cannot. The brush stroke remains. The reeds lean together. Whatever hides, hides inside that leaning. So the net tightens not by force, but by width and time. More surveys join the watch. Wider fields and deeper exposures add faint movers to the map. Machine learning grows stricter about false trails and kinder to slow dots. Infrared maps subtract galaxies better than before. Radar, on rare brave nights, reaches outward for echoes that may never come, because it is right to try. Each step warms the room by a degree. On a ridge at dawn, the dome begins to close. Frost rims the handrail like thin lace. Inside, the last frames of the night sink into storage. On a screen, a small light curve looks dull and perfect. A rotation period, guessed from gentle brightening and dimming. Nothing strange, nothing to tell a story about. The ordinary can be a mask. The ordinary can also be all that there is. The watchers accept both truths and keep their patience. If a cloaked traveler moves out there, it wears the dark the way a seal wears water. It is at home. It smears its heat into background, leans its orbit into lawful lanes, and lets time do most of the work. If no traveler moves, if only rock and ice keep to their old roads, the quiet is the same. The edge still teaches how to listen. The light outside turns the sky a soft gray-blue. You can almost see, in that color, the whole idea of stealth. Not absence, but blending. Not silence, but a voice so close to the hum of nature that it passes for weather. The wind over the ridge says nothing. The instruments rest. The long night smooths its own footprints and leaves a clean surface for the next watch. And in that smoothness, a question lingers, a small, calm thing that does not ask for an answer now. If something waits in cloaks and shadows, will we learn to see the difference between the night and the one who wears it? The glow fades into the horizon, and the quiet returns to its cradle, carrying a wonder that does not dim. Night stretches across the domes like a soft sail. The mounts settle, the cables hum, and the air above the ridge turns glassy with cold. Across Earth, a wider net wakes observatories in dry deserts, telescopes on islands, small backyard rigs in quiet towns. Each lens points with the same patient desire, to turn a rumor into a path and a path into a truth. Surveys have grown bolder. Where once a camera framed the narrow field, now wide mosaics sweep whole constellations in a few steady breaths. Sensors drink fainter light than older mirrors ever dreamed. Readouts arrive clean and quick, with noise shaped and understood. The cadence is careful. Expose, read, slew, settle, expose. Between those beats, software flows like a calm river. It subtracts sensor quirks, erases satellite scratches, and lines the sky across hours so stars hold still and slow movers take their tiny steps. Arrays work like conversation. A southern telescope catches a field that a northern one cannot see. A small scope picks up the tail of a sequence when clouds roll over a large one. Infrared eyes above the atmosphere glance where dust glows. Optical eyes on the ground return for motion. The network is not perfect, but it is woven. It holds, even when one thread frays. Machine learning joins the watch without raising its voice. Trained on thousands of honest movers, asteroids that zip, comets that haze, minor planets that glide, it learns the rhythm of ordinary. Then, it listens for notes that do not quite fit. A dot that moves too slowly for its brightness. A curve that keeps the wrong time across months. A faint step that returns to the same family of angles as other faint steps already known. The model does not announce discovery. It sends short lists. Humans read the lists by lamplight and circle 3 or 4 with a pencil. The pencil mark is old-fashioned and right. It says, look closer. Closer, in this room, means deeper. A candidate with 2 points becomes 4, then 6. Then a thin arc that starts to remember where it will be tomorrow. The fit tightens by a breath. The orbit guess narrows from a meadow to a path. Each new measurement is a bead on a string, and the string begins to curve with intention. If the curve leans like its distant cousins, the forbiddance pattern shows the faintest smile, a suggestion that one brushstroke may indeed be made of many small, loyal lines. But more data never fully closes a mystery. It refines. It thins the fog. It shows where the unknown can no longer hide, and where it still can. The team understands this. They draw maps of certainty, shading regions where a hidden mass cannot be, given the motion seen so far. With every season, the shaded areas grow. What remains is not a point. It is a quiet country where the traveler, if real, might lodge. On some nights, imagination walks, careful and slow, beside the instruments. What would count as a sign that breaks the drift of ordinary? One idea is a metallic glint, just a spike in a spectrograph, a line where I should not sing. The spectrograph is ready, its gratings tuned like a harp. It is a fussy listener. It needs more light than a distant rock will give. Yet the team keeps it close. If a faint body brightened for any reason, a fresh face turned by rotation, a sparkle from frost, it might feed the slit just long enough for a thin echo. Nobody expects steel in the rainbow. But readiness means holding out a small plate when the sky offers crumbs. Another idea is radar. Radar across the outer dark is daring. Power spreads thin. Echoes return weak or not at all. Still, on rare nights when geometry smiles, when Earth, Sun, and a faint mover align just so, teams point long wavelength beams and let them walk. Hours later, receivers lean into the hiss. Most times, nothing rises. Once in a great while, a bump appears too near noise to trust. The bump is logged. The log is saved. No one paints a target on the wall. Readiness is being able to try without demanding a show. The wider net is also temporal. New surveys work not just deeper, but faster. They return to the same fields within hours, then days, then weeks. They fill seams left by weather and moon. They schedule around bright planets and crowded star lanes. They catalog not only what is found, but what is confidently not there, which is its own kind of knowledge. Into that schedule comes a second layer. Alerts that cross the world in a minute. Notes that say, possible mover here. Please check. Conditions good. A dome answers from another continent with a brief on it, and the net tightens by one more loop. In these rooms, small routines carry weight. A student checks a histogram of point spread functions, tiny bell shapes that tell whether the focus is kind. A senior scientist scans a dashboard where each field is a square graded from cool to warm, based on how many candidates passed the first filters. In the corner, a graph of false positives shrinks month by month as the pipeline learns to ignore streaks and mirrors and bright star ghosts. The work is not dramatic, But each improvement is a quiet turn of a screw that makes the machine sing more true. The forbidden pattern is treated like a trail of crumbs. Not one crumb is a meal, but crumbs draw a line through the trees, and if the line holds long enough, you begin to trust your feet. The line here is made of clustered perihelia, shared tilts, nodes that prefer a small range of longitude statistics that do not demand a planet, but behave as if a steady hand pushes faint things into agreement. The more objects found in that family, the more persuasive the brushstroke becomes. It is not proof. It is pressure. Sometimes a night teases. A candidate repeats too well, its brightness curve too clean, its motion too tidy. The team smiles softly because true things often look messy. A perfect curve can be a trap of galaxies, not mistaken for a moving point, a sensor behaving oddly, a cosmic ray that hit the same place twice by accident. They check, and the tidiness collapses into ordinary. Relief follows relief that the tools are honest, and that surprise still earns its keep. The net spreads beyond light. Radio dishes tilt for background surveys that measure the sun's own weather. Spacecraft at the edge report the faint sway of the heliosphere. As cycles rise and fall, the data feeds into models that predict the best times for a weak signal to ride between gusts. If anyone were to whisper, those would be good nights. No one expects a voice. They set the table anyway. Backyard watchers hold a part of this net too. A small mount can follow a slow dot if given steady coordinates and patience. An amateur in a quiet suburb can confirm a step between midnight and 2, or between moonset and dawn, when big domes are pointed elsewhere. These tiny confirmations stitch gaps shut. They are not showy, but they harden arcs that would otherwise wobble. A network of small hands puts strength in large maps. The more the net tightens, the more humility grows. An answer that arrives soon is still an answer that arrives on the schedule of orbits, not people. A candidate can take years to become a known body with a name and a path. A pattern can take a decade to pass from unlikely to necessary. The team teaches this gently to students, to reporters, to themselves. More data narrows the unknown, but never fully closes it. Closure is rare in the sky. Convergence is the rule. Yet convergence brings its own thrill. Imagine, for a moment, the single night when a stack of images makes sense in a new way. A moving point appears where 3 models agree, not in a vague patch but within a tight circle. The brightness matches the distance expected. The motion fits without stretching. The follow-up an hour later repeats the step. Emails travel the world before dawn. A larger mirror confirms at twilight. The dot is there again and again after that. It is not bright, not loud, not different in color. It is only faithful to a curve that closes a gap in the map. You could call that discovery. You could also call it listening long enough to hear the end of a sentence. What if confirmation arrives? Not as a new body, but as a signature? A spectrograph catches a narrow glint that is hard to explain with dust alone. A radar ping returns a more stubborn echo than rock should give at that range. A thermal map shows a smear that refuses the average. None of these would shout. Each would ask for retesting, for careful doubt, for the joy of being wrong until you're sure. But they would also mark the moment when the net felt skin. The thought warms and cools with the same breath. If the hidden presence is only a planet, the lesson is beautiful. Gravity's quiet logic carried to its simple end. If the presence is stranger, a traveler wrapped in stone, the lesson is the same at first. Keep the net even. Keep the tone calm. Let method lead. A strong net is not for catching alone. It is for knowing where the water moves. Tonight the arrays continue, soft and strict. The moon lifts. The schedules adapt. A patch of sky moves into shadow. A different patch brightens. The servers hum like low insects. On a whiteboard, someone writes a time window. 3 hours next week when the geometry could favor a risky radar try. On another board, a small arrow points from a candidate's designation to a new line. Confirm with 2 meters class if clear. A student nods, then writes to a friend at a smaller observatory. Can you get 2 frames between midnight and 1? Same field as Monday. In the quiet minutes before dawn, a thin cloud scuffs the stars and then drifts away. The last exposure of the night closes. The image looks ordinary. Ordinary is good. Ordinary is the floor you stand on to reach a shelf where grace might sit. The team backs up data, powers down lamps, and steps into the cold. Their breath shows as pale fog. The ridge holds its shape under a sky that is both familiar and new. Somewhere inside that sky, the breadcrumb trail continues. Perhaps the next crumb will fall soon, a dot that leans the same way as the others. A step that tightens a fit by half, a number that turns unlikely into very likely. Or perhaps the crumb will hold back and the net will widen again and again after that. Either way, the work is ready. The instruments wait like cupped hands. The night lets go by degrees. And as the gray lift of morning brushes the domes, the thought takes one more quiet shape. A truth could arrive in a single night, soft as a meteor, bright only for the minds that have prepared for it. The glow fades along the horizon, and in that fading lives a steady expectation, not a shout, not a promise, but a calm conviction that when the sky is ready to answer, someone awake will hear dot night drapes the observatory like a shawl. Inside, the lights are low, and the hum of equipment sounds like a steady breath. Quiet readiness is not a headline. It is a posture, a way of standing in the dark with hands open, prepared to listen and answer without alarm. If a hidden visitor is out there, if a faint object in a lawful orbit carries more than stone, what can Earth do? The answers start small, practical, and calm. First, we learn to notice. Space domain awareness sounds grand, but it begins with simple habits done well. Telescopes sweep the sky on regular schedules, then sweep again to catch the same fields from new angles. Radar arrays note when geometry allows a brave ping into the dark. Infrared maps look for soft warmth against colder background. Each tool is honest about its limits. None promises certainty alone. Together they make a net that does not strain but holds. The next step is to check. A candidate appears dim, moving slowly on an orbit that leans like others we've tracked. A single team does not declare. They share a coordinate and a time window. Another observatory, far away under different weather, points, and looks. If both see the same step, the arc grows stronger. If a third group confirms 2 days later, the orbit fit tightens again. Quiet readiness trusts the echo. Real things repeat when asked kindly. In a low office beside the dome, someone updates a checklist. It is not a military list. It is a scientist list with soft edges and clear boxes. Repeat observation within 24 hours. Publish coordinates and uncertainties. Annotate any odd weather or seeing. Cross-check against satellite catalogs. Run spectral slope if brightness allows. Each box turns a rumor into a record. Each record is an act of care. Communication matters. Panic is loud. Readiness writes plainly. If a faint object draws attention, the first public note is simple and slow. What was seen, where it was seen, what is not yet known, when more data may arrive. The tone is steady and human. We are looking. Others are looking with us. Here is how you can check our work. Open data lowers fear because it invites many eyes to share the load. Many eyes also make fewer mistakes. In the radio room, deep dishes listen to space weather beacons. The sun has moods. Its wind rises and falls in an 11-year rhythm. Bursts of charged particles can drown weak signals. A radar triplan for a quiet night may need to wait. Readiness accepts that. The schedule flexes around the sky's weather. because a clean measurement next week is better than a noisy one tonight. Patience here is a tool. On the mountain, a backup plan sits on paper. If an interesting object brightens or bends where it should not, who calls whom? Which observatories can pivot quickly? Which wavelengths will help most? A list of phone numbers rests by the keyboard, not the kind that wakes sirens, but the kind that wakes colleagues. Can you take 2 frames at 2:10 and 2:30? Our fit suggests a small deviation. We need your sky. The calls are favors traded among friends who share the same long night. Readiness also lives in the pipeline. Software is trained to catch slow dots and ignore false ghosts. Yet the code leaves a door for people. A flagged candidate lands in a human queue, and an astronomer looks with their own eyes. A smudge that the algorithm loved becomes a galaxy not under closer glance. Another smudge that the algorithm nearly tossed proves to step exactly as the model predicted. The human and the machine lean toward each other until their errors cancel more often than they add. In a lab across campus, spare time goes to drills. A class practices running a rapid follow-up. The instructor gives a pretend alert with coordinates 4 hours old. The students pull star catalogs, plan exposure times, and write the little commands that move a remote telescope in another country. Nobody expects a show. The drill teaches rhythm how to go from we heard to we looked without haste or waste. Muscle memory works for instruments too. Governments listen as well, but quietly. Space traffic control watches near-Earth paths where satellites and rockets cross. That watch is sharp and fast. The far watch is slow and soft. When scientists ask for help, a temporary frequency, a radar slot, a coordination window, the answer follows process rather than mood. A shared sky needs shared rules, and the rules are better when written before the night is loud. Public voices shape the room. If a new object stirs interest, storytellers have work to do. Calm narration translates numbers into images people can hold. Think of this as a slow-moving ember in a huge, cold field. We are tracing its path to learn if the field has a hidden slope. Good narration does not promise drama. It promises respect for facts, for doubt, for each person's feeling of smallness under the stars. Clarity is a kind of kindness. Quiet readiness is also about edges. What if the object is natural and ordinary? Then the response is still useful. We learn how to coordinate faster, how to avoid bias, how to explain without heat. What if the object is natural and unusual, an odd composition, a rare tilt, a resonance we did not predict? Then the plan is the same with more joy. What if the object is not entirely natural? Even then, the first steps do not change. We verify, share, breathe, and only then choose what to try next. The practical shield is not hardware so much as habit. Repeat observations are a shield against error. Independent checks are a shield against pride. Open methods are a shield against rumor. Clear language is a shield against fear. Telescope time set aside for follow-up is a shield against missing a moment. No single shield is thick. Together, they are enough for this stage, enough to know what is real before we decide what is wise. In a calm meeting, someone asks about risk. If it's hostile, what can we do? The answer is plain and limited. At these distances and speeds, we cannot fight the dark. But we can know. We can map. We can measure heat, motion, and reflectivity. We can model how different masses would pull on distant orbits and compare the pull to what we see. We can rule out the loud options and leave only the quiet. Knowing is not control, but it is the ground under our feet. Engineers offer gentle tools that might help later. A small CubeSat could ride a larger mission outward, carrying a simple camera and a beacon. It could practice long sleeps and short wake-ups, learn to aim in cold, learn to talk softly over far distances. A ground team might test new processing that finds very slow motion over months rather than nights. These are seeds, not walls. They grow quietly while the sky continues its patient school. Ethics enters like a friend who knocks before stepping in. Suppose we confirm a visitor that looks made. Who speaks for Earth? The answer is not a single voice. It should be a chorus: scientists, communicators, cultural leaders, and people from many shores agreeing on small, careful steps. Do not point a bright beam at a faint object without thinking. A sudden radio shout is poor manners. If we send any signal at all, let it be narrow and brief, like a tap on glass rather than a flare. And let the decision to tap come from consent, not from a race to be first. Schools have a role in readiness. A teacher prints a fresh star chart and asks a class to find the ecliptic on a winter night. Children draw the path with chalk and make their own tiny surveys. 3 dots tonight, 3 dots next week, a small line between them. They learn that motion writes truth across time. They also learn that patience does not mean waiting without action. Patience means working at a tempo the world can hold. The world is woven from many tempos. Emergency response moves fast. Astronomy moves slow. Quiet readiness bridges them. If some future night brings louder news, the bridge lets us carry calm across the gap. We will need both halves of ourselves, discipline to gather the next frame, and grace to speak softly to one another while we gather it. Even the quietest plan benefits from practice with noise. Rumor storms rise quickly now. A false image can run faster than a true plot. So some teams rehearse public corrections. This clip is not our data. Here is ours. This curve was fit without parallax. Here is the corrected one. This claim skips uncertainty. Here are the error bars. The tone is never scolding. It is patient, precise, and repeatable. Truth told slowly is a lullaby for the world. Late in the night, a small alert arrives from a survey, a dim mover near the limit, leaning with the same family of angles we followed for years. The control room does not cheer. It shifts posture. A scheduler opens a slot. A telescope inches toward a new field. A student checks the exposure time twice and speaks the plan aloud. The dome thins its breath and waits. The exposure begins. A kettle whispers on a hot plate, because caffeine is a cousin of readiness. The image comes in with its usual snow. Subtraction clears the field. A dot remains where the model asked for a dot. The second frame seals it. The object is not brighter than last week, not stranger in color, not unexpected. Yet the room feels the weight of a correct step. This is how a shield is built, one quiet confirmation at a time, until the map is strong enough to carry hard questions without wobbling. Down the mountain, a newsroom drafts a small piece. Astronomers refine path of distant object. Call for more observations. The lines are short and clear. No alarm, no rumor. A quote from a calm voice says, "The next few nights will reduce our uncertainty by half." Another voice says, "If you have a telescope, here are the coordinates." People read this in kitchens and buses and beds. Some step outside and look up, not to see the object, too faint, but to feel part of the listen. Dawn edges the ridge in silver. The last tasks are simple. Back up the data, write the log, leave notes for the day shift. Someone places a sticky tab on the monitor. If clear tonight, prioritize follow-up on 202 XYZZ. Someone else wipes the whiteboard clean except for one sentence. Verify, share, breathe. The room empties like a tide. Quiet readiness does not end when the door clicks. It travels with the people who practiced it, in their voices, in their emails, and the way they answer a friend who asks, "Is it real?" The answer is measured and kind. It is real enough to keep looking. We'll know more soon, and we'll tell you what we learn. Out on the road, the mountain shrinks in the rear window. The sky above it is pale blue with a sweep of thin cloud. Somewhere far beyond that color, a faint body keeps its slow promise. If it is only ice and rock, our readiness has still done good work. If it is more than that, our readiness is how we keep wisdom close to hand. The day warms. The world turns. In the long story of the night, nothing loud has happened. Still, something has changed. The instruments are aligned. The languages stay. The eyes are many. The hearts are calm. And in that collected calm, the dark feels a little less unknown. The glow on the horizon softens and slips, and in its slipping, it carries a delicate assurance, the sense that, should a quiet visitor step a fraction closer, we will meet it with clarity, not fear. And the silence will deepen without breaking. The world sleeps in rooms of warm air and soft light. But the sky above those roofs is cold and steady. In that quiet, people keep vigil. They stand on porches, rooftops, and mountain ledges. They sit beside humming mounts and open notebooks under dim red lamps. The universe does not ask for a crowd. It asks for patience, and the night watchers answer with small, faithful hours. A backyard telescope tracks a slow star field. The tube is white, scuffed at the edges. Frost gathers on the tripod. A dog turns 3 times in a circle and settles in the grass. On the laptop, a rectangle of the Kuiper dusk appears. Gray, grainy, honest. The owner clicks expose, then leans back and breathes fog into the air. A kettle hisses in the kitchen. The exposure bar crawls. The watcher is one person in 1 yard, yet the act feels larger, like holding a corner of a great dark quilt so it does not slip. In a high desert, a student clicks through frames from a survey camera. She blinks them like old plates, hunting for a dot that steps a fraction. Her fingers smell like the dust on the dome's rail. She marks 2 spots with a digital pen and checks the catalog. Not a star, not a known mover. Maybe noise, maybe cloud. She flags it for the midnight team and leaves a note. Her handwriting is small and careful, the way people write when they know others will read in the same quiet. Across the ocean, an old observer rolls a roof back on creaking tracks. He has done this for decades, and yet the moment the sky opens always feels new. He remembers a meteor that cracked the dark when he was young, a green fire that drew a brief river of light through the zenith. He keeps a logbook by the eyepiece. Date, seeing, thin cloud, yes, no. A line for feelings he rarely fills. Tonight he writes 1 word, still. Then he sets his mount to follow a field where an email asked for 2 frames. Any time between 1 o'clock and 2:30. The watchers are many kinds. Some are professionals inside domes made of careful money and long planning. Their mirrors are polished to hunger, their spectrographs tuned like harps. Others are amateurs, which only means they love the sky without a paycheck attached. They share software, patience, and a habit of speaking softly near open optics. They trade coordinates and weather, and they cheer each other's small wins as if they were their own. In this work, skill grows like a plant, watered by repetition, lit by curiosity. Together, they build the map. A faint object found in a survey needs a second night, a third, a week's worth of steps. A single domed eye cannot hold every hour. So the map passes from hand to hand across time zones. A town in Chile adds 2 points. A ridge in Hawaii adds 1. A garage in Poland adds another between low clouds. The arc tightens by a millimeter on a screen, and that millimeter matters. It's the difference between guessing and knowing where the traveler will be tomorrow. The tone among them is soft because the sky teaches softness. Clouds ruin plans. Winds shake focus. Power blinks. A cable cracks in cold. None of it is failure. It is weather. The watchers have learned not to scold the world. They brew tea, reboot, relevel, and wait for a gap. When a gap comes, they do not waste it on hurry. They move like people carrying a sleeping child. There is awe in the work, but awe does not shout. It sits in the way a spectrograph's thin rainbow shows a tiny dip that means water ice on a world smaller than a city. It sits in the way 3 measurements from 3 places line up on a plot like little boats in the same bay. It sits in the way a comet's tail curls when the solar wind changes tone, a soft turn that instruments feel like a finger on their spine. Each detail is small and exact. Together, they lift the heart without raising the voice. Sometimes the watchers do not find what they seek. A candidate fades into ordinary noise. A dot that seemed to step turns out to be a galaxy's knot. A light curve refuses to settle into a rotation. Those nights are not wasted. They teach the eyes to see honestly. They keep pride thin and curiosity warm. The logbooks record these nights with the same care as any small win. In the margins, a few draw tiny sketches of the moon, or write the temperature, or add a memory, a teacher's name, a friend's laugh, the smell of cold pine. On a mesa, a pair of observatories share a narrow road and a common sky. The operators wave without speaking when their domes turn, 2 ships swinging at anchor. One works in infrared, tasting heat that leaks from the edges of cold. The other works in visible light, tracking motion like a clock. Their data will meet later on a screen far away. For now, each adds its quiet spoonful to the pot. Science can be a banquet that never ends. Nobody eats alone. There is another kind of watcher too, the one who steps outside with no telescope at all. A nurse walking home at 3 a.m. stops and looks up and sees Orion rising. The 3-star belt sits on the edge of a thin cloud. She breathes once, slows, and continues. A truck driver pulls into a rest area and leans against the hood. He finds the Big Dipper, then the North Star, and feels less lost. A teacher in a city opens a bedroom window and points out Venus to a sleepy child who will not remember the names in the morning. Only the feeling that the sky is a place they can visit again. These watchers do not log or plot, but they strengthen the same muscle, attention without rush. Inside the data rooms, attention turns into craft. People write code that finds slow dots in a sea of pixels. Others write code that tests the first code, feeding it fake skies to see what it misses. When someone shares a better trick, how to subtract a galaxy light more cleanly, how to mask the smear of a satellite without erasing a faint mover, the thanks arrive quickly and without fuss. Credit is currency, but so is kindness. A short message that says, "This helped us," can power an entire week. The night watchers also hold the public thread. When rumors swell, they answer with plots and simple words. When a journalist calls, they explain the difference between possible, likely, and confirmed. They do not inflate. They do not deflate. They walk the fine line where trust lives. Their voices carry the same tone as their rooms, steady, warm, free of spectacle. Truth is enough here. It needs only air. What binds all of this is not fear of a hostile thing. It is a shared awe at being awake together in a cosmos that runs on patient rules. A hidden planet, if it exists, is part of that patience. A disguised traveler, if such a thing drifts among the distant orbits, would still move by those rules. Either way, the watchers lean into the same work. Track, compare, listen, and speak clearly about what the listening reveals. On some winter dawns, the vigil ends with a small gift. A faint object, logged a week before, sits exactly where the model said it would. Its step is the size of a grain of salt on the screen, but it's right. The room breathes out. Someone pours the last of the coffee. Someone else emails a friend 3 time zones away. Confirmed. Your call was good. The subject line is plain. The joy inside the words is quiet and clean. The night watchers do not expect applause. They expect weather, noise, and long waits between neat lines. Still, they are not alone. A university press office posts a small note with coordinates and a chart for anyone to try. A high school astronomy club meets in a cold parking lot and follows the chart with mittened hands. A family in a city checks a live stream from a mountain and whispers when the stars slide past on the screen. In this braided attention, loneliness lifts. All has company. When the last frames save and the domes close, the dark keeps its own counsel. The telescopes sleep like folded wings. The road down the mountain is quiet except for gravel and wind. In 1,000 homes, people who kept the watch step inside and warm their hands. And the stories they carry are soft, a clean focus. A lucky clearing in cloud, a curve that finally settled. A note from a stranger saying thank you for sharing the night. What does the vigil earn? Not control, not safety from every surprise. It earns something gentler, a readiness born of many eyes and steady hearts. A map that thickens by degrees, a language for telling each other the truth without heat. If the unknown traveler is real, it will meet a species that looks up together and answers with care. If it is only gravity, the gift remains. We learn to be present under the stars, and present is a form of wisdom. Dawn brushes the horizon with pale gray. The dog wakes and shakes. The roof rolls shut. The laptop pings once and goes dark. Above the houses and the ridges, the sky holds its slow secrets with the same calm as before. And as the glow fades into day, the watchers carry a quiet certainty. Even if nothing speaks, the listening matters. The silence deepened, yet hidden in that silence was something waiting to be understood. The night is a page without lines. In that quiet space, motion becomes handwriting. No letters, no sound, only a path that curves through starlight like a slow sentence. If a hidden traveler wants to speak without words, it can do so with gravity's brush. A tilt here, a timing there, a gentle correction at perihelion that says, I am here. We see you. Astronomers already read this language. They have for centuries. A comet returns on schedule and says, it remembers the sun. An asteroid's orbit shifts a tiny bit and admits that sunlight pushed on its dust. Neptune once announced itself through math before any lens could frame it. The cosmos speaks in trajectories. We reply with telescopes and patient plots. Picture that far country beyond Neptune, the Kuiper Belt, where ice worlds move like lanterns dimmed to embers. Their orbits look scattered until patience makes the pattern glow. Some lean the same way. Some gather their nearest points in a quiet cluster. Some tilt as if nodding toward a place we cannot yet name. If intent were hiding, this is where we would read it. Not in color or surface frost, but in choreography. A message without language needs rules both sides understand. Gravity is that shared rule. It is fair and universal. You do not need our dictionaries to write with it. You need only a path. Suppose an unseen traveler adjusts its orbit at a distant perihelion by a small, deliberate amount, just enough that the next pass arrives a few days earlier than physics alone would predict. Not a shout, a nudge. If we fit the path over years and find that nudge repeating, we will ask, is this nature, or is this a note left on our doorstep? To answer, the watchers test the simple stories first. Solar wind pressure can push dust. Thermal re-radiation can tug irregular bodies, the Yarkovsky effect, tilting an orbit's campus by tiny degrees over a long time. Passing stars can pull the outer garden a touch. Survey bias can sketch false order where none lives. Each of these is a familiar accent in the sky's voice. But if, after subtracting them, a shape remains a repeatable bend at the same place in the same way, the remaining shape begins to feel like intention. A path can also speak by plane. Imagine a traveler that shares the Kuiper Belt's general slope, then tilts a little more every perihelion, as if bowing when it passes the sun. Not much. Just enough for a careful fit to catch. Over several circuits, the bow would stand out. We would see a signature that refuses to fade, a plane that processes too neatly, a rhythm too tidy for chance. Even then, words like perhaps, unlikely keep us honest. In this bedtime telling, caution is part of the lullaby. You, standing under the sky, already know some of this language. When you watch a satellite glide steady and silent, you sense purpose without seeing a pilot. When a meteor flashes and ends, you understand it wasn't aimed, only falling. The difference is written in motion. Purpose lingers. Falling finishes. The outer system gives us the same choice every night, to watch for lingering. If a traveler wishes to wave, it has options. One wave is a resonance. Choose an orbit whose period keeps a simple ratio, with a known object's period 2 laps for every 3 of a famous distant body, for instance, and keep that ratio unusually tight. Nature can do this, yes, but an intentionally crisp resonance, maintained beyond the expected drift, would be a polite knock. Another wave is a pause, dwell a little longer near aphelion than an ideal ellipse allows, as if low thrust held you for a breath before you drifted on. The hold would be small, the kind that hides in noise for a while. Noise does not repeat with grace. A chosen pause can. There are brighter ways to signal, of course, radio beams, lasers, flashes. Yet across such distances, even bright becomes faint, and faint becomes lost among stars and storms of plasma. Motion is the safer letter. It endures. You can copy it later. You can compare it with the motions of cousins and ask why one family member keeps a neater room. Astronomers test for intent the way a tracker reads snow. They look for a second pass over the same ground. A single footprint is curiosity. 2 in parallel hours apart means someone walked with a plan. In the sky, 2 aligned adjustments a year or a century apart say, a hand touched here more than once. The tools for seeing this touch are simple at heart. Angles, times, residuals, the little differences between what a perfect ellipse promises and what the object actually does. Repeated residuals, same sign, same season, draw the mind like a soft bell. A motion message can be more subtle still. Consider an answer in phase, where an unseen traveler shifts its perihelion a tiny amount when Earth has a certain geometry, say, when our night side faces outward and our radio breath thickens the most. Not enough to break anything. Enough to align meaning with chance. Over cycles, if adjustments always preferred that geometry, the preference itself becomes a word. Preference is intense shadow. Natural explanations live in the same room. A surface that vents a little gas near perihelion can fake a push. A shallow outgassing could mimic a low-thrust correction and be no message at all. A cluster of orbits might be the fossil of Neptune's old migration, not a watermark left yesterday. This is why the narration stays gentle. Every candidate sentence must survive ordinary grammar before we ask if it is poetry. If a message without language ever crossed from rumor to theory, how would we reply? The most respectful answer may echo the way it came, with motion, modest and slow. We could time our telescopes not to shout, but to observe at moments that match the traveler's rhythm, a coordinated choreography that says, we see the pattern, we can keep time. Or we can adjust the trajectory of a small, non-threatening craft already bound for the outer system, a millimeter of course change made in daylight. Logged in public, a motion note written where instruments can read it back later. In a universe that values patience, a gentle reply honors the medium. Even silence can be part of the conversation. If the pattern repeats without escalation, we may choose to keep reading and not respond, the way one listens to a brook and does not dam it. Listening is an action. It shapes budgets, schedules, and the hours of people in cold rooms with red lamps. It teaches how to keep wonder wide while fear stays folded. There is also a mirror here, held out by the sky. We leave motion messages of our own. Spacecraft that fly by planets write their stories in gravity-assist arcs, a sentence curved by mass and plan. Old rocket stages wander in odd ellipses. Some satellites slip into resonances and out again, marks of our hands long after our hands let go. If someone far away read our motion, they would learn our habits. Bursts near launch windows, tidy transfers, steady stations, a few lost things that drift. We already speak without language. We rarely think who listens. A message in geometry invites a different kind of courage. It asks for restraint, to resist declaring intent when noise might be singing. It asks for consistency, to track for years with the same care you brought on the first night. And it asks for a quiet heart to accept that the answer, when it comes, might be the ordinary beauty of gravity alone. Gravity's handwriting is not a consolation prize. It is the script on which every world writes. Still, the mind imagines the moment a pattern becomes undeniable. A student working late notices a residual curve that lines up with last decade's residual curve in the same object, two soft humps where a flat line should be. She rechecks the parallax, the calibration, the seeing. The humps remain. A second observer across the ocean finds the same shape with independent data. The plots travel in small emails, not press releases. A senior scientist says it could be outgassing and lists the ways to test. Someone else says it could be thrust and lists the same tests. Nobody sleeps much. They do not argue loud. They add nights to the schedule. Weeks later, the hump repeats in the same season, at the same place along the orbit, under slightly different geometry, stronger this time, not by pride, but by statistics. A third team folds in thermal data and shows that the surface is too cold for the venting needed to explain it. A fourth assembles a control group of similar objects and finds no twins. The message, if that is what it is, remains only a nudge. But nudges that persist are words in this language. What would the content be? Perhaps nothing more than acknowledgement. We see you. We can keep time. Or perhaps it is a proof of life check, a way for a traveler to confirm that instruments still wake after long sleeps, that power still flows, that patience still holds. To us, it would feel like a companionable tap on the railing of a shared bridge. To the traveler, it might be routine. Routine can be love in the long dark. And if the nudge never comes, if every suspected hump becomes dust, every neat resonance softens into ordinary drift, every cluster untangles as catalogs grow, then we still win a different answer. We learn how to read motion so well that we stop seeing ghosts. We learn how to teach that reading to children who will spin new domes and build new algorithms. We learn that awe does not require a visitor. The solar system's own handwriting is enough to keep a mind awake. You step into the night and look up without needing to know which object hides which plan. Stars hold still. The zodiacal light leans, a soft veil dusted by sunlight. Somewhere past that veil, a minor planet turns, its orbit a long lullaby sung to the sun. If a traveler rides among those notes, it keeps perfect time with the choir. If not, the choir is still beautiful. In the control room, a screen dims to standby. A plot saves with a modest name and a date. The dome shutters close like eyelids. No voice breaks the quiet. No trumpet announces meaning. The message, if there is one, is written in the path itself, and paths take years to read. The glow on the horizon thins, and the night hands the sky to morning. Somewhere the imagined traveler, or only rock, passes through a point in space that has no label but the one motion gives it. The silence does not feel empty. It feels full of grammar we are still learning to speak. And in that fullness, a small question lingers like a drifting shadow at the edge of starlight. If the cosmos is talking in curves, can we become patient enough to understand what it has already said? Night holds its breath, and the sky becomes a quiet crossroad. Two paths run side by side through the dark. In one, the drifting shadow remains only a cold world, sleeping far from the sun. In the other, the shadow turns inward like a fortress, waking still dim, still lawful, but aware. The choice is not ours to command, but it is ours to meet. The question is simple and hard. How do we stand here at the forked night? We start with posture. Defense without aggression means we steady our hands. We learn the sky as if we were sailors in a harbor at midnight, soundings taken, lanterns hooded, voices low. We do not charge out into currents we do not map. We do not shine bright beams that blind our own eyes. We chart the channel. We keep watch on the tide. If a traveler crosses the mouth of the bay, we mark its line in pencil, and we wait to see if it keeps to lawful water. Observation without provocation is the next rule. Telescopes look and spectrographs listen. They do not shout. Radar tries are rare and respectful. If geometry and weather invite, we knock softly, send a long wave that is more whisper than knock. And even then we tell each other before we try. Patience and consent become tools, not decorations. We accept that some nights will pass without the data we want. The universe moves at the pace of orbits, not the pace of us. Ethics arrives like a lighthouse, steady and quiet. Not every light is an alarm. Some lights simply say, "Here is safe water." If a hidden presence exists, our first duty is to speak truthfully to one another about what we see. We keep open records, plain language, and shared checks. We respect the voices that remind us to go slow when our hearts want to run. A signal too bright can cause more fog than clarity. A story told too soon can turn wonder into noise. The ethics of the fork begin with restraint. The metaphors help. Harbors, currents, beacons, these are soft ways to hold a hard topic. A harbor protects without closing the sea. Currents carry even a careful ship. We plan around them. A beacon guides, but it does not pull. In the forked night, we become a harbor for our own calm. We learn the currents of rumor and fear, and we raise beacons that light only what needs light. We let darkness keep its useful places so faint things can be seen. Science lends other kinds of light. Exoplanets have taught us how to infer what we cannot touch. We read tiny dips in starlight as worlds crossing stars. We parse atmospheres from the thinnest colors. These lessons say that patience beats hurry. With enough orbits, the truth stops wobbling. Pulsar timing teaches precision. A millisecond slip means a new idea is needed. If nature can keep time that well, so can we. Black holes teach waiting in deeper terms. They keep secrets for eons and tell them only when a star strays too close. From them, we learn that knowledge sometimes ripens on long branches, and reaching too fast only bruises fruit. Caution is not fear. It is respect for scale. If a supernova can seed life by scattering heavy elements into newborn clouds, then slow processes can be generous. If patience can turn dust into planets, then patience can seed peace. The forked night asks for that kind of patience, a long rhythm of gathering, checking, and speaking gently. In one future, the traveler never wakes. It is ice and stone only, moving on a path that looks like purpose from far away because gravity writes such tidy lines. In that future, we practice our calm for the sake of being careful with the world. We build better nets, share better data, and tell better stories. We make peace with the fact that wonder does not need a visitor to be full. We still gain something, A culture of listening that is strong enough to carry the next question when it comes. In the other future, the traveler turns a little. Not much, no bright line of thrust, no sudden flare, just a motion that repeats where only physics should rule. The correction is small and polite, a bow at perihelion that we learn to spot. Then responsibilities multiply. Who speaks? In what tone? To whom first? The fork opens into many smaller forks, and in those paths we will want a map we built before the need. That map begins with a simple promise. We will not mistake loudness for truth. We will not raise alarms to win attention. We will not bury doubt to win certainty. We will keep a shared ledger where each measurement is signed and dated and retraced. We will invite many eyes to test the same curve. If a claim cannot survive that, it does not belong in the bright room where everyone listens at once. Another promise concerns contact. If motion writes a message without words, our reply, if any, should honor that language. No bright radio flood, no sweeping megaphone. A reply in geometry is the modest path. A small change to a spacecraft already outbound, timed in public, logged in plain text. A tiny curve that says only, we understand this alphabet. This is not timidity. It is respect for the medium that came first. We also promise care with symbols. A name is not a verdict. A headline is not a harbor. Words like hostile and probe carry heat that data may not. We choose cooler words, traveler, candidate, signature, until the facts demand more. We remember that instruments never measure motive. Orbits measure motion. Motion hints, then leaves a space for humility. On the ground, the forked night touches ordinary rooms. A newsroom drafts two versions of a story and chooses the quieter one. A teacher tells students, we will follow this for months, not minutes, and draws a timeline on the board. A council that handles national science meets and agrees on principles. Open data by default. Care with speculation. Shared messages in many languages. A child asks at dinner if aliens are coming, and a parent says, we don't know. What we do know is that people all over the world are working together to learn. That is good news already. We look outward too, beyond our own harbor. The history of worlds we cannot visit comforts us. Exoplanet catalogs began as rumors and grew into atlases. At first we saw hot giants in tight leashes. Later we learned to see small cousins of Earth. The method refined. The noise yielded. The picture widened. If we could endure that patience for distant suns, we can bring the same habit home to our own faint frontier. We remember our false starts. Vulcan, the supposed world inside Mercury's path, was once a serious idea. It trained observers to look with discipline. When the idea felt a better theory, the discipline remained. Fast radio bursts were once suspects for calling cards. Now they are part of galactic weather. Each time, being wrong made us better at being right. The forked night invites the same steady improvement, to hold a hypothesis with open hands and let it go when tests ask us to. There is also room for kindness. People bring fear and hope to the same table. Some need to hear that a hidden fortress is unlikely. Others need to hear that being open to surprise is not naive. We can hold both needs without picking a fight. Kindness, here, is accuracy spoken softly. It sounds like, here is what the curve says and doesn't say. It sounds like, here are 3 simple reasons we favor nature, and 2, we keep the door ajar. We must also guard against our own bright hunger. The mind loves a mystery solved in one night. The fork asks us to choose the slower thrill, a string of small confirmations that add up to trust. This is a grown-up kind of awe. It lives in graphs and dates and careful subtraction. It lets sleep come even when the answer is not yet printed on the sky. If the night ever tilts toward the strange practical work will still lead. We would coordinate deep radar, longer exposures, and thermal maps at times of lowest noise. We would watch for any pattern that links motion with our own geometry, then test natural causes without mercy. We would involve ethicists and cultural voices early, not to slow science, but to widen wisdom. A choice made in a small room with the wrong tone can echo badly. A choice made in daylight, with many ears, can hold. What about protection? It is honest to say we have little power at the outer edge. Distances are vast. Speeds are steady. And the things that can be changed quickly are us, not the sky. But protecting the room where truth is told, that we can do. We can keep our instruments clear and our methods open. We can make sure no single group owns the narrative. We can ensure that the faintest data gets as much care as the loudest claim. These are shields, even if they don't look like walls. On a hill above the sea, a small observatory turns its dome. The operator checks the schedule. 2 frames on a slow mover at 1:20 and 1:45. A spectral try if it brightens by a whisper, a note to a partner across an ocean. The plan is modest, the kind a harbor town makes when it hears a bell out in the fog. Lights are lowered. Lens is cool. The first exposure begins. The future divides and rejoins in the mind. Perhaps the dot lands where the curve predicts, and nothing else happens, and that is peace. Perhaps the dot lands with a small, repeating grace that asks us to read more closely. In either case, we answer with the same tools: care, patience, and language that warns without heating the room. The forked night is not a panic. It is a practice. We practice steady eyes, honest plots, quiet hands. We practice talking to each other in ways that make the next talk easier. We practice standing at the water's edge with a lantern shaded, its beam turned down toward our own feet so we do not stumble. We practice leaving the horizon dark enough that a new light, if it rises, will be seen. Sometime close to dawn, cloud drifts in a thin sheet over the ridge. The second exposure waits out the veil and then completes. The dot is there. The fit tightens a breath. No trumpets. Only the soft click of a shutter, the soft scratch of pencil on a log. In the quiet that follows, the room feels held by process, by shared work, by patience learned from stars. If a supernova can seed life, then caution can seed peace. If black holes can keep time by the dance of hot rings, then people can keep time by the dance of careful minds. If exoplanets can be named from dips and dust, then meaning, if it ever comes, can be heard in curves. The harbor lamps dim. The current slides by, steady and sure. The beacon's small circle holds. High above, the sky keeps its wide face, untouched, immense, and calm. The forked night does not choose for us, but it invites us to choose ourselves, to be the kind of watchers whose quiet makes room for truth. The glow thins along the horizon, and in that thinning is a hush that feels like promise. Not an answer yet, but the strength to meet one when it comes. In the drifting quiet, one can almost sense that another secret is about to reveal itself. Night folds around the domes like a soft cloak. Inside, screens glow at low brightness, and the hum of cooling fans is a steady lullaby. The work tonight is not discovery alone. It is something quieter and stronger, a way to move together if the unknown grows clearer. The general protocol is simple, almost childlike in its rhythm: verify, share, breathe, and yet it carries the weight of wise rooms and long skies. Verify begins with small steps. A faint object appears in a survey image, a slow dot among steady stars. No one declares. The team schedules a second exposure within hours, not days. They point, expose, subtract, and check. Is the dot where gravity says it should be? If yes, they ask a second team, far away under a different sky, to repeat the check. Independent eyes are a lantern against error. The orbit fit tightens by a breath. Only then does the object receive a temporary name, a placeholder that asks for patience rather than applause. Verification is not just seeing twice. It is seeing clean. The pipeline removes sensor ghosts, satellite streaks, and mist from thin cloud. Spectrograph flats are recalibrated. Timing stamps are cross-checked with atomic clocks. A student remeasures by hand the pixel positions the software marked automatically. The numbers agree. Where they do not, the student circles the difference and writes a small note. Seeing variable, frame 3. Honesty makes the curve more true. Sometimes, verification asks for other senses. If the object brightens enough, the spectrograph takes a quiet sip. A slope here, a dip there, the usual ice and dust, or something slightly off. Infrared maps, if available, look for a faint smear of warmth. Radar, rarely, tries a long whisper when geometry is kind. Each instrument adds a thread, and the threads do not compete. They braid into a stronger rope. Then share. The coordinate, the time window, the uncertainties, the best fit elements with error bars, these leave the room quickly and calmly. The message is plain. Candidate at these positions. Motion consistent with distant minor planet. Additional observations requested. No trumpet. No headline word like breakthrough. The sky does not grant those words lightly, and the community chooses not to borrow them early. Sharing also means methods. Teams post the code that measured the steps, the calibration frames, the way they modeled bias. They invite others to break the result and show how it breaks. If a better flat field removes the candidate, good error caught and logged. If the dot survives harder tests, better still confidence that does not swell beyond its size. Open work earns trust, and trust keeps panic out of the room. Across the world, small observatories answer. A backyard rig adds a pair of points at local midnight. A university telescope grabs a short series before dawn. Clouds close one dome. Another opens. The arc grows. A map of tomorrow's probable position shrinks from a field to a thumbprint. In each reply is the same tone, steady, warm, kind to doubt. Science feels like a quiet choir here, many voices holding one soft note. Now breathe. The general protocol protects the human heart as much as the data. A coordinator reads a dozen excited emails and writes one calm summary. A journalist calls, eager, and the answer is clear and slow. We have something real enough to keep looking. We will know more after the next 3 nights. Here's why. The language acknowledges fear and hope without feeding either. It names uncertainty as a companion, not a flaw. Breathing also governs pace. The schedule stretches to fit the sky's weather. If solar wind noise rise, if the heliosphere's whisper becomes a hiss, the team delays the radar, try rather than accept bad echoes. If the moon climbs bright over the field, they hand off to an infrared instrument, not bothered by glare. Rushing turns thin truth into thick rumor. The protocol refuses hurry, even when it is tempted. Communication follows the same rhythm. A public note is posted with 3 short sections. What is known, what is unknown, what comes next. A small graphic shows the orbit band as a soft ribbon with shaded edges. No hard lines where none exist. People can read and rest. Someone in a city apartment steps to a window, sees stars between buildings, and feels included in the listening. Inclusion as part of the calm. The protocol anticipates forks and writes them down in daylight. If the object stays ordinary, the path says, archive cleanly, fold lessons into the pipeline, thank the eyes that helped. If an anomaly persists, if motion keeps a strange neatness after nature's causes are tested, the path says, widen review. Invite additional teams. Add ethics and culture voices to the check-in calls. Choose words that describe, not judge. Instruments measure motion. People infer meaning. The protocol keeps those roles separate until facts demand more. Gentle does not mean weak. It means precise without heat. The document on the wall lists steps that look small but matter. If media interest spikes, update every 24 hours whether or not results change. Use the same chart style each day so differences are honest. If a rumor claims certainty, answer with one clear counterplot, not 5. If a result fails, say so plainly and thank the team that found the flaw. These are not public relations tricks. They are ways to keep truth audible. Schools and public rooms are part of the plan. A teacher receives a simple kit, a star chart, a stripped-down plot, a few sentences in 6th, 7th grade language explaining perihelion and why some orbits cluster. Students draw ellipses on paper with pens and string. They learn by touch what it means to verify. At night, a family looks up and knows they are watching the same sky as the domes. The protocol helps them feel the tempo, and feeling the tempo keeps fear quiet. On the technical side, the plan is specific. Allocate follow-up time in small, guaranteed slots across a month. Spread targets across latitudes to dodge weather. Keep one deep instrument on call for spectral tries if brightness crosses a threshold. Pool false positives to train the next version of the machine learning filter. Back up raw frames in 2 places. These details build the floor we stand on when surprise walks in. If the object ever hints at more than nature, if a pattern at perihelion repeats with a grace that refuses simple causes, the later pages of the protocol open. They still begin with verify, share, breathe. Add coordinated checks at agreed times. Add a statement of principles. No bright signal sent, no sudden stunts, no single voice claiming to speak for all. If a reply is considered, it is a motion reply, a small, logged adjustment to a craft already outbound, approved in open meetings, archived in plain sight. The action is slow on purpose. The way a lighthouse turns. You see it because it keeps time, not because it burns the world. We remember that data can carry feelings. All rises in the room when a fit lands right where a month of work predicted. Fear can rise too when a curve refuses to settle. The protocol does not ban feelings. It gives them a chair and a name. We are excited, a note may say, and here is how we check that excitement against error. We are uneasy, another may say, and here is why patience is the better answer than a loud one. This honesty is a form of safety. Late in the night, a new frame loads. Subtraction clears the field to noise and small truths. The dot is there again. The step is small, consistent, calm. A student smiles without speaking and writes the time. A senior scientist adds 2 numbers, draws one oval, and leans back. The oval is narrower than yesterday. The room breathes. At a desk by the door, a printed card lists the whole of it in 3 lines. Verify, repeat, compare, invite other eyes. Share, open methods, clear plots, steady words. Breathe, pace the work, speak kindly, keep wonder warm. The card is not magic. It is a reminder of how to be when the sky is both generous and silent. The gentle protocol is a promise kept in small ways. The way a kettle is filled before the shift. The way a plot is labeled so a stranger can follow. The way a thank you goes out with data at 3 a.m. These gestures do not find planets by themselves. They make it possible to trust the planet when it is found. Outside, the zodiacal light leans up from the horizon like a soft veil. The domes turn to park. The screens dim to black. If the signal brightens one day, we will meet it with clarity. If it stays a whisper, our listening will still be worth the hours. The world turns toward morning. And as the glow thins, a quiet assurance remains. Truth told slowly can cradle a whole planet to sleep. And in that cradle, the silence deepened. Yet hidden in that silence was something waiting to be understood. Night draws over the world like a gentle veil, and the stars come forward one by one. The air is cooler, the streets are quieter, and the sky becomes a calm room where memory and wonder meet. Whether Planet 9 is rock and ice or only a pattern in the math, the mystery has done its first good work. It made people look up together. It taught careful voices to share soft questions, and it slowed the rush of a busy day to the tempo of an orbit. You can feel that tempo when you breathe out under starlight. The Milky Way lifts like a silver river. A faint comet might graze the edge of vision, no larger than a smudge on the mind. Somewhere far beyond Neptune's blue echo, cold bodies keep their slow promises. They glide through a cradle of silence where the sun is a small coin and heat is a story from long ago. The solar system is not just a set of planets. It is a long, patient choreography. Even the smallest dancer keeps time. The universe has always dreamed in such motion. Nebulae rise from dust like soft clouds caught in sunbeams. Gravity gathers that dust into knots, and knots become stars. Around the new fires, disks of grain flatten and swirl, and small worlds begin to form. The story is older than any city, older than the names we give the constellations. When you trace an ellipse with a pencil and string, you copy a step from that very old dance. You borrow the universe's script for a moment and let your hand learn its quiet curve. People have followed that curve for centuries. A mathematician once wrote Neptune on paper before any telescope found it. A careful eye blinked 2 plates and saw Pluto move like a speck with purpose. Later, spectrographs turned starlight into thin rainbows and found exoplanets hiding in tiny dips. Radar brushed the moon. Probes touched comets. Rovers drew tracks in Martian dust. These were not loud acts, even when headlines made them sound that way. They were hours and days and weeks of patient steps, small gears and steady hands, sleep lost and logs kept, quiet checks and careful joy. What Planet 9 real or imagined adds is a new kind of question that keeps people kind. To ask is to share. A distant orbit might cluster and tempt the mind toward wonder. A hidden traveler might drift under a coat of dust. Or perhaps there is only gravity's neat habit, wearing no mask at all. Each version invites the same posture. Look, test, tell the truth slowly. In that posture, fear loses its edge. The night becomes a room where curiosity is allowed. There is also a wider map beyond any single body. Galaxy cluster tides tug the very edges of our home. Passing stars leave soft edits in the orbits of the far cold. Dark energy turns the great expansion like a river you cannot see, but can measure if you wait long enough. Pulsars tick with millisecond hearts. Black holes keep clocks of hot rings. In these huge machines, human lives are small. Yet smallness is not a wound. It is a reason to hold each other's hands while we listen. Close your eyes and name the instruments that made the listening gentle. Telescope mirrors that gather soft glow like rain. Spectrographs that sort photons as librarians sort books. Infrared maps that see warmth as a faint blush. Radar that whispers and waits for an echo. Algorithms that comb the static. Notebooks that hold log lines written at 2 a.m. A kettle that sings on a hot plate. A dog asleep by a back door while images save in slow rhythm. The dream of the universe uses ordinary things to tell extraordinary truths. The dream also uses us. People keep the watch. Students blinking frames, elders guiding mounts. Programmers pruning false trails. Teachers explaining perihelion with pins and string. A parent points out Venus to a child. A trucker finds the North Star and feels less lost. A nurse on a night shift steps outside, sees Orion rise over a hospital roof, and resets her breath. None of these acts changes the motion of planets. All of them change the room in which those motions are understood. If Planet 9 exists, it will not care about our feelings. It will turn when gravity says, and that will be enough. If it does not exist as a body, as a probe, as anything but a rumor, the lesson remains. The path to the truth was worth walking. We learned to coordinate without alarm, to share data without pride, to speak kindly to strangers about doubt. We learned that wonder is strong when it is quiet. The dreaming universe does not promise comfort. It promises meaning if you are patient. A supernova scatters heavy elements so that later clouds can form worlds and oceans. A comet brings water to a rocky Earth. A disk of dust becomes a family of planets, some warm enough for cities, some cold enough for eternal sleep. Slowness builds the stage where quick lives can walk. You are a quick life. You can still match your steps to the slow music and feel at home. Think of the scales nested inside one another. In your chest is a pulse. In your sky is a planet's year. In your galaxy is a rotation that takes 200 million of your years to finish one lap. Beyond your galaxy, clusters drift, and the cosmic web hums with filaments so large that words like mile and meter bend under the weight. Yet the same simple rules, force, motion, conservation run through every layer like a silver thread. Wherever that thread goes, attention can follow. Attention is a kind of love you can give the world for free. There is a tenderness in uncertainty when people hold it together. We do not know why a set of distant orbits lean the same way. Yet. We do not know whether the lean is old memory or fresh push yet. We do not know if another civilization has ever crossed our path yet. The word yet is gentle and honest. It leaves room for tomorrow without stealing sleep from tonight. It lets a scientist say, "We are not sure," and keep dignity. It lets a listener hear, "We are not sure," and feel included, not shut out. If a disguised messenger ever proves real, it will change less than our stories think. It will not erase the slow skills we needed to find it. It will not replace the kindness we learned by looking together. It might give us new questions, how to reply in geometry, how to share the sky with care, but it will not make the old questions weaker. The universe is not a riddle with one answer. It is a library where each book opens onto more shelves. In that library, Planet 9 is one thin volume on a high rack. The ladder we built to reach it, telescopes, models, ethics, patience, is the real treasure. The ladder can be leaned elsewhere when the time comes. It can help us read the atmospheres of small exoplanets, where a faint dip hides a hint of water. It can help us map the dust around newborn stars, where future worlds are learning their steps. It can help us guard our own sky with grace, so that when rumor runs faster than truth, the truth still stands with a soft, steady voice. You standing under this same sky are part of that voice. You do not need equations to press your palm against the cool night and feel scale. You can look toward the dark where the outer dancers move and imagine a drifting shadow at the edge of starlight, a shape that might be rock or memory or both. You can feel your own smallness and let it be a comfort. You can carry two stones in the same pocket, hope and caution, and keep them polished by use. When dawn is far, the zodiacal light leans like a pale bridge. Dust shines with borrowed glow. The bridge looks fragile, but it holds. So does the human bridge between labs and living rooms, between desert domes and city windows, between languages and longitudes. We built it by listening. We keep it by telling the truth slowly. We extend it by teaching children how to draw ellipses and how to say, "I don't know," without shame. The dreaming universe is patient with our questions. It answers in orbits, in spectra, in radio murmurs from the heliosphere, in faint anomalies that give way to better models, and, sometimes, to better mysteries. It answers in the way a cold object can hide under a soft glow, and in the way a map can thicken until a hidden path appears. It answers by reminding us that awe and understanding are not rivals. Awe often arrives first and asks understanding to join it on the bench. Tonight, somewhere beyond our warm lanes, a minor planet turns its quiet face. The sun lights one side like a thin smile. The long arc of its orbit is a sentence we have not finished reading. Maybe a heavy neighbor casts a slow pull. Maybe old tides still echo in the outskirts. Maybe a traveler sleeps inside a dusted shell, counting radio breaths and tasting the solar wind. The sky does not say. It keeps still and lets us earn each line. Inside a small control room, a last exposure ends. The image looks ordinary. Ordinary is where most miracles hide. A student writes a time in the log. A senior scientist rubs tired eyes and smiles the way a person smiles when a little piece of a huge thing fits. The kettle clicks off. The dome begins to close. The mirror cools. The night lets go by degrees. You step outside and listen to the quiet, not for words, but for presence. The air is thin and kind. The stars do not hurry. Somewhere in that wide dark, the question you carry is both smaller and better than when you started. The answer may be years away. It may be a planet found, or a bias unmasked, or a lesson in how wonder can live without proof. It may be all three. The sky lightens at the edge, a soft gradient from black to blue. Birds try a few notes the way instruments tune before the music starts. The dream of the universe does not end when morning comes. It moves into daylight work, into code and calls and clean plots, into children drawing ellipses with string, into quiet promises kept between colleagues. Night taught the lesson. Day keeps it. And as the last stars fade, a calm thought remains. Whether the unknown traveler is real or only gravity in a beautiful mask, we have already met something vast and kind, the shared awe that made us look up together. The glow thins across the horizon, and the world returns to its errands. Above those errands, the cosmos holds its steady face. The silence deepened, yet hidden in that silence was something waiting to be understood.